Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Water and Power Commissioners meeting. Today is Tuesday, April 27, 2021. This proceeding is broadcast on Channel 35. The exact broadcast times can be found by contacting Channel 35. Assistant General Counsel Richard Tom.
Thank you. As permitted under Governor Newsom's order of March 17, 2020, all of the board are teleconferencing from remote locations. Also, consistent with the governor's order, all public comment will be taken telephonically. We may announce a recess if we have difficulties or lose a quorum due to technical difficulties. Members of the public wanting to offer public comment should call 213-306-3065 and use meeting code 187-524-7879# and follow the queue. Again, 213-306-3065 and the meeting code is 187-524-7879#. There is a call moderator, and when it is your turn to speak, please state whether you are speaking on specific agenda items. You have 2 minutes. It is important when you are going to speak to please turn down the volume of your devices so we do not get audio feedback. The acting board secretary will now call the roll.
President McCLAIN-HILL.
Present.
Vice President Reyes.
Present.
Commissioner BARAD. Commissioner BARAD. Commissioner NEEMAN Brady.
Present.
Commissioner LEHRER will be joining us shortly. President McCLAIN-HILL, we do have a quorum.
All right, that's terrific. Then we'll move forward. Could you please move to public comment?
Okay. Public comment with the area code 909-325. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bob Gardner. I am a supervisor in Mono County. I will be speaking on item 8B and item 16. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment this morning. I want to state that Mono County supports these actions by the department. We support these projects because they will improve the restoration of the various streams in the Mono Basin. That includes Rush Creek itself, Parker Creek, Walker Creek, and Levining Creek. They will all benefit from this project. We support these items because they are consistent with the overall State Water Resource Board decisions regarding the department's diversion of water in the Middle Lake Basin. We look forward very much to the work and resulting positive impact on the ecosystem. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak on this matter.
Thank you. Next public comment with the area code 570575. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Good morning. My name is NICOLE, and I was speaking on general public comment.
Go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Like you said, my name is NICOLE. I'm here representing the LA Alliance for a New Economy, and I also am a ratepayer in the city of Los Angeles, and I live in East Hollywood. I want to speak today about the ongoing utility debt that working families in Los Angeles are facing. I first want to say thank you to the board on your leadership on this issue. It's been really encouraging to see leadership from this department stand up with the community. But as we know, this debt is continuing to climb, and I wanted to call today to make sure LADWP is continuing to do the work necessary to protect our low-income Angelenos. We need the DWP to use all of its capacity, state, federal, and local resources to erase utility debt for ratepayers. I believe through the consolidation of federal, state, and DWP resources, the department should be able to fully erase utility debt caused by COVID-19, particularly from low-income customers. Thank you for your time today. That'll be my end of my comment.
Thank you. Caller with the area code 323807, please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Yes, good morning. My name is Jasmine Vargas. I'll be speaking on general public comment, and I would also like to speak on item agenda number 8 on the equity metrics.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you so much, LADWP Board of Commissioners, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Jasmine Vargas. I am an organizer with Food and Water Watch Food and Water Action and a proud member of Repower LA Coalition. I'm calling today with my colleagues and my allies at the Repower LA Coalition to call on LADWP to erase utility debt for LADWP ratepayers that have been gaining and mounting utility debt during COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused economic recession and created a situation for communities in LA, specifically low-income communities of color, that cannot be understated. We are in a crisis, and as a crisis, I call on the LADWP to act in accordance to this crisis by creating a way of forgiving utility debt for the communities that are most impacted. We also think and we recommend that you see this as an opportunity to create a longer term plan to address utility debt in general, especially as we're moving to 100% renewable clean energy. We want to make sure that communities that are being protected by reducing pollution and increasing clean energy are also going to be able to take advantage of all of the savings in energy and in their bills that can be made with this transition. This would include pairing a robust comprehensive program with the HYPE Home Energy Improvement Program and budget building for the working class families so they can start fresh from a standardized bill as where it should be. Furthermore, the equity metrics, if I may add, are going to be really important to making sure that we're hitting our goals in making sure that this is an equitable and fair transition for not just communities, but LA at large. Thank you again. Have a good day.
Thank you. Caller with the area code 310, prefix 902, please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on. Okay. Caller with the area code 323. Oh, that was Jasmine. Sorry. Caller with the area code 800342. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on. One more time. Caller 8 with the area code 800, prefix 342. Are you there? Okay, moving on. Caller with the area code 626, prefix 676. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on. Caller with the area code 626, prefix 676. Are you there? Okay, next caller with the area code 760, prefix 709. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Charlotte Lang, Mono Lake Quizutica Tribal Chairperson. I'm speaking on 8B and 16.
Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Mono Basin Water Licensing Project. The tribe is in support of this project for restoring streams in the Mono Basin, which the damage due to Rush Creek, Levining, Parker, and Walker Creeks. The importance on a tribal perspective is the gathering of the foods, willows for the baskets, habitats, meadows for the sage hen, the bugs, the insects, and we speak for all of the habitats in this area in which this water will be helping preserve, especially the dust control. On item 16, the mitigated negative declaration in accordance with the California Environment Quality Act, we support the commissions of adopting this, but we do have concerns of being left out of discussions. Our cultural resources should be between the tribes and DWP and not the public. Management should be at the table to hear tribal concerns to make sure decisions made are sensitive to the tribes. The tribes would like to conduct a sensitivity training for management. Mitigations made for the general public do not cover tribal needs. Also, we are in the process of having a TEK summit and would like to invite some of the management, if not, well, the staff we are working with. It's a technical, traditional ecological knowledge summit on July 14th, 15th, and 16th, and we will be working with a lot of agencies, and we're inviting DWP to be a part of that to hear the tribal's concerns on our traditional lands. Also, the tribe is in the process of being federally recognized and would like to start a conversation with DWP to reclaim our historical lands to the Mono Lake Quisitica tribe. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. The next caller with area code 757 with prefix 407. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Cameron Hurd on general public comment.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you to the commissioners for allowing me to speak. My name is Cameron Hurd. I'm here representing the Repower LA Coalition. I'm also a ratepayer here on the west side near Culver City. And we all know that COVID-19 has forced millions of Angelenos into crisis, and the Repower Coalition has been leading the charge to erase utility debt for LADW ratepayers since August of last year. We really want to thank the board for acting on utility debt relief with the CARES funding last year. As the debt continues to climb, though, we want to make sure that LADWP is doing the continuing work that it takes to protect low-income Angelenos, and we urge the board to think of who stands to gain the most from erasing this utility debt and who would lose the most if urgent action is not taken. We're talking about low-income communities of color, people who have been vulnerable before the crisis and now after COVID-19, during COVID-19 as well. Frontline communities in Los Angeles desperately need urgent action from LADWP, and we need a strong commitment toward erasing utility debt rather than managing it. We need LADWP to use all of its capacity, state resources and federal resources as well around it to erase utility debt for ratepayers. And we have recommendations including full erasure of debt caused by COVID-19, particularly for low-income customers, consolidating federal, state, and LADWP resources. We also need a program that's free from harsh penalties and complicated applications that make it harder for working people to get the relief they need. And we need to pair programs like HEIP with budget billing so that working class families can start fresh. And all residential customers definitely need that access to level pay and monthly billing. But we need this immediate relief now. Our communities can't afford to wait any longer. We can't afford to press our luck with the lottery, but we need something that brings us out of debt. So we're launching advocacy with state legislators to push for state resources to go toward this debt. We still need LADWP to play its role. So we need the board to take leadership, both locally and on the state level, in pushing for robust, substantial relief that focuses on the debt burden of low-income communities of color. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next caller with area code 626, prefix 453. Please state your name and the item you're speaking on.
Hi, this is Tiffany Wong, general public comment.
Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, board. This is Tiffany Wong with Strategic Concepts in Organizing and Policy Education, SCOPE, a community-based organization in South Central LA. I'm also a DWP ratepayer. As part of the Repower LA Coalition, we've been advocating for utility debt relief since August after hearing how utility bills have been both a financial and emotional stressor for our communities. Low-income communities of color that have faced disproportionately high utility burden and vulnerability to COVID impacts. We ask that you walk in our shoes, in our community members' shoes, and understand how utility debt is impacting people in their daily lives. And that will help to understand why we continue to advocate for this immediate debt relief and investment in long-term affordability. We ask that you erase utility debt. CARES funds, just debt management plans, and business as usual will not meet the gravity of this issue at the utility and also in community members' lives. And we know that DWP is well positioned to take bold action and be a leader in this space. We also ask that you meet people where they're at. Debt relief and assistance programs need to address technology and language barriers and come with full customer service and case management. We can't afford to put more programs or solutions out there that aren't meeting folks where they're at, that aren't addressing the issue. And so we need the board to take this leadership on both the local and state level, and look forward to working with you all on transformative solutions that will meet the extent of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. The next caller with area code 323, prefix 246.
We can't afford to put more programs or solutions out there that aren't meeting folks where they're at, that aren't addressing the issues. And so
Okay. We'll move on. Yeah, okay. Next caller with the area code 323-399. Please state your name and the item you're speaking on.
Rosalind Tovar, general public comment, please.
Go ahead, please.
My name is Rosalind Tovar. I'm the outreach coordinator at Communities for a Better Environment, and I am also part of the Repower LA Coalition. Frontline communities in LA desperately need LADWP to take urgent action now to create an equitable relief program to avoid low-income ratepayers from being stuck in lots of debt later this year. However, we need a strong commitment towards erasing utility debt instead of just managing the debt. We need to find ways of uplifting our community members, not setting them up for failure through penalizations of debt management programs. Without utility debt erasure, working families are at risk of disconnection and being sent to collections. So as a coalition, our recommendations for the relief program is a relief program with a full erasure of debt caused by COVID-19, particularly low-income customers, by consolidating federal, state, and LADWP resources, a relief program without harsh penalties, a relief program without complicated applications that are inaccessible due to language barriers or understanding how to use technology that makes it hard for working people to get the relief that they need. And we also advocate that the relief program we have access, that all residential customers have access to level pay and monthly billing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have a caller with an extension internal. Do you wish to speak? He's listening. He's not speaking. Okay. Then caller with area code 800-342. Are you there? Okay, then caller with area code 213-749. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, yes, hello, my name is Roxana Aguilar. I'm with LA Conservation Corps and with the Repower LA Coalition. I was just calling to share my public comment. LADWP has, really great resources in terms of supporting, ratepayers in the last round of utility debt relief. So I would highly encourage LADWP to continue to provide that support to the community. We are obviously still in a pandemic, and we highly support the full erasure of debt caused by COVID-19. And we would also like more support in terms of, LEHRER programs that help communities, disadvantaged communities across Los Angeles. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One more time, we're going to go back to caller with the area code 323, prefix 246. You need to turn off your mic on your speaker to speak.
To provide that support to the community.
Okay. We'll try. All right. That all public comment is now closed. President McCLAIN-HILL.
Thank you. I was just trying to get off mute. Thank you. I appreciate it. A special thank you to Supervisor Gardner for his comments at the top of the meeting. And also, I just want to acknowledge the comments of the tribes and indicate that I'm interested in understanding better their perspective, and to thank the multiple speakers from Repower LA. It matters when you show up and represent on behalf of our most vulnerable customers. And there will be more to say about utility debt as we move forward in the meeting. Next, we have on the agenda is the item number 3. Mr. Adams, you have a report or briefing?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. I have just a few items I'd like to go through quickly, but to begin with, we did have a accident this morning involving electrical arc flash at a vault in Hollywood that we had 3 employees injured at. I'd like Andy Kendall to brief the board quickly on the update on that. Andy, could you do that for me?
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Good morning, commissioners. This morning at approximately 1:30 this morning, we had 2 underground splicing crews out working in Hollywood. They were in the process of reconfiguring a circuit to take an outage to do some work. In the process of doing that, there was an electrical arc. Initially, we had 4 employees transported to various hospitals. 1 was treated for smoke inhalation and released. A second is, he feels fine, but he's being treated for smoke inhalation and should be released later this afternoon. And we have 2 other employees who are both being held, and both have some burns and smoke inhalation. So at this point in time, it's too early to determine exactly what happened to cause these injuries in this accident. It will be fully investigated. At this time, all of the customers that were out approximately at the time of the incident, they had to drop multiple circuits in the station, which had about 8,000 customers out. All of those customers have been restored. Our power system safety group is at both hospitals currently, assisting the families, and our down worker program is being activated, which supports the families so that they can have hotel rooms close to the hospitals, and meals and stuff that'll be supported. So they'll be supported for the time that their family members are in the hospital. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Like I said, at this point, we don't have a lot of information yet. We will investigate and determine the cause and work to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Andy. And certainly, our thoughts and prayers with the folks that are in the hospital and their families. And it's a sober reminder that we have, quite a large crew of people that are out doing very dangerous work every day, and we hope that they recover quickly and their injuries are not too severe. But it's a reminder that this is a very serious and dangerous business, that we're grateful that we have so many men and women who are willing to do this work on behalf of the city. Next, I'd like to.
It's important.
Go ahead, Andy.
Just that, fortunately, in this incident, they were wearing all of their personal protective equipment, and the protective equipment did what it's designed to do, which is mitigate the seriousness of injuries. The protective equipment doesn't stop an accident from happening, but its job is to mitigate the seriousness of the injuries. And in this case, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. At a future meeting, we will, show you the remnants of what that personal and protective equipment looks like now. Most of it is destroyed, but it did its job, and our employees from having much more serious injuries. So.
Thank you, Andy. Next, I want to talk about real briefly about our return to work. Last week, I issued a memo to all employees about a planned return to work, release return to work more toward normal in mid-June. We've seen a tremendous improvement in the incidence of COVID, particularly in the LA region. Mayor noted in his meeting yesterday that LA would be amongst the lowest of incident rates of any state in the United States, both in terms of serious illness, the incidence of infection, and the number of people that are hospitalized. And so as we see society around us returning toward normal, we're also looking at returning more of ourselves toward normal. As the board's aware, all of our field forces and many of our office folks as well have been at work doing their normal duties full time. We still have a number of employees, particularly those situated in this building, who have been telecommuting, primarily since the holidays when the outbreak became so large. All folks are reporting at least 1 or 2 days a week to work and telecommuting the rest of the time. So as we approach mid-June, when the state is due to have its next level of reopening, and we should continue to see the numbers improve, my plan is to have the telecommuters return to work more on a normal schedule. I wanted to get the memo out so employees would have a couple months heads up about this change, and the idea is to make this change after school would be out. And so the issue of parents getting their kids to and from school, which is arguably very complicated right now with people being in school part-time, that we'd be past those issues. And so there are a lot of details we're working out. We have quite a large number of employees who have been vaccinated already. I think every employee has had an opportunity to be vaccinated if they wish so, and we'll continue to reach out to employees with opportunities to get vaccinated. But a combination of vaccines and testing and looking at what we need to do to make the workplace continue to be safe. I don't believe that we'll be able to put 3,000 plus people in this building immediately, and so we'll have to look at what a work schedule looks like. But we are hoping that on June 14th, for most of our folks who've been telecommuting, to get back to more of a normal engagement at the workplace. Recognizing our customer call centers have been very successfully working remotely, and they are probably the densest population of people in the office that we have, and we'll probably continue to let them function the way they are as we see how the pandemic continues to ease, and hopefully Southern California area reaches the predicted herd immunity sometime in June. So there will be more details coming out, but at least I want to get word out to employees initially that the plan for a June return is close to normal at work, and I'll have more information on this shortly. I'm happy to answer any questions, but the details are being addressed, and we're working very closely with the IBW and the Management Employees Association as we do this to make sure that we're all moving in sync together for the welfare of our employees. A week ago, Monday, the mayor gave his State of the City address. I'm sure the board members were able to hear that and listen to what the mayor had to say as plans for the city for the next year and where we stand now. Very importantly for us, I just wanted to point out that the mayor did highlight considerably the LA 100 study, which of course we've had presented to the board and has been presented to the public as well. Key to that is the mayor's desire to move us more quickly to a renewable energy future, which we are prepared to do. The mayor has requested that we move our 2036 date to be 80% renewable and 97% carbon free in the energy mix that we deliver to customers, to move that date up to 2030. And so we have the plans in place to be able to do that. So we are accelerating our goals, our 2036 goals to 2030. And then the mayor also put us on track and wants us to target to meet President Biden's energy vision to be 100% carbon free by 2035, which is 10 years ahead of our current schedule. We recognize that NREL study gave us a path to do this. There are many challenges that have to be overcome to get there, but we are putting together the plan for the power system and how to get there, and including achieving a number of things the mayor pointed out was decreasing the demand on the Valley Generating Station, looking to build a new hydrogen-powered plant at Scattergood, increasing in-city solar, particularly in underserved communities and where people may not own their roofs, and engaging more people in a renewable future, expanding the weatherization initiatives that we've discussed during the budget cycle, and really providing more energy efficiency to all households. And at the same time, trying to tackle the massive transmission upgrade projects that we need to that we have facing us. And so we are going to put together a plan to present to the board shortly on what it means to get to 2035. It's ambitious, it's doable, but we have to tackle a lot of the challenges. So we'll be looking forward to talking to the board about how we do that and do it in a way. The mayor also highlighted Operation Next, which is the water systems plan to maximize use of recycled water at the Hyperion treatment plant and really use that as a substitute source of water here in Los Angeles, and so we can be more locally sourced and not have to rely on near as much imported water in the future. Coupled with the good news, the NREL study and the mayor's goals for the power system, I'd like Reiko to briefly highlight a SEPA recognition that the power system received just recently. Reiko, are you there? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So LADWP is very proud to have been recognized by the Smart Electric Power Alliance, or SEPA, for our efforts to transition to a modern and carbon-free energy system. LADWP was listed on SEPA's 2021 Utility Transformation Leaderboard, which recognizes the 10 utilities that have demonstrated the greatest progress in the transition. SEPA conducted and analyzed multiple surveys designed to measure meaningful progress across multiple dimensions of utility infrastructure, programs, strategy, and operations. There were over 130 utilities of all types, sizes, and geographic areas that participated in the process. SEPA used 4 different criteria or evaluated under 4 different dimensions: clean energy resources, corporate leadership, modern grid enablement, aligned actions, and engagement. And some of the things that SEPA insights into the surveys were: explicit commitments to carbon reduction are an important and necessary first step for utilities. The transformation goes beyond clean energy resources. A comprehensive approach is needed that touches all dimensions of utility business and operations. A transformation of utility culture is necessary. Leadership, transparency, and accountability facilitate the transition to a clean and modern future. And utilities can't achieve a carbon-free system alone. Leading utilities are proactively and strategically working with stakeholders to facilitate the transformation. So it is a great honor to be recognized for the SEPA Leaderboard. It's a testament to this board's and the city's ongoing commitment to decarbonizing and modernizing our power grid. Being placed on the leaderboard means that LADWP has the opportunity to lead the way and serve as an example for other utilities in our efforts to decarbonize the power grid while supporting our core principles of reliability, equity, environmental justice, and affordability.
Thank you, Reiko. And congratulations. It's great news and great work on behalf of the power system. Next, I'd like to turn to Rich, who would like to comment on our the governor's drought declaration and sort of the state of affairs in Los Angeles as we see it and measures that we may or may not need to take at this time. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I think the last time we reported out that our snowpack was at 47% of normal of what it would have been on April 1st, so certainly a dry year. More importantly, what that means in terms of runoff from our own snowpack in the Eastern Sierra. So we are set to see about 445,000 acre-feet of water runoff in the Eastern Sierra. 338,000 of that is going to stay up in the Eastern Sierra to meet our obligations on the lands up there, whether it's in Mono Lake, the other streams and rivers, for the environment, for fish and for fowl, as well as for vegetation, leaving only a fifth, just a little over 100,000 acre-feet that will come to the city. So it's just to underscore the fact that our partners in the Eastern Sierra and the needs up there get water, what we call at the bottom of the ditch, so they get the water first, and whatever's left over comes to Los Angeles. I do want to comment on the governor's drought declaration. Right now, it's just for Sonoma and Mendocino County, mostly because of ag-related issues and for the reality that they are seeing extremely low levels in their reservoirs. Remember, 75% of the water used in the state of California is to ag, so dry periods hit ag a lot bigger than they do the urbans. I guess my comment would be that Los Angeles doesn't need to be in a shortage allocation or rationing or any further cutbacks or restrictions. We presented the draft urban water management plan last month, and we'll be coming to you early this next month in May. But those plans are to account for situations like this. Now, whereas it's dry now, we do have water, and we are well prepared because we do have a lot of water in surface storage and reservoirs as well as groundwater storage. In fact, we have historically high levels of storage in our reservoirs in the Southern California, Los Angeles region, and our groundwater basins, including that in the Owens Valley, are very well managed and are not in overdraft like you might see in some other parts of the country. And that's a result of really redundant and multiple sources of supply. And the reason we have those sources of supply is because of the capital investments that our ratepayers have made really over decades, and they continue to make those investments, including a Measure W for additional stormwater capture. If you've paid your county property tax bill lately, you'll see that charge on there. But they've also made incredible personal investments over the last 3 decades in conservation and water use efficiency. So now in dry times is a time for our customers to realize the benefit of those savings. And they really shouldn't be penalized in spite of those efforts. I would say should be congratulated. You know, the governor's program or response to the drought is, as a campaign, is called Save Our Water. And in fact, our folks have been doing that, Angelinos, for decades, and you can actually see that water that they've saved. They're sitting up in those reservoirs in those high levels in the groundwater basin. And we aren't in unique times, and we've seen weather patterns like this before. During the 2012-2016 years was our 4 consecutive driest years ever. In fact, we had 0 flows at one time coming to the city from the Eastern Sierra. And yet we didn't have any extra mandatory restrictions in place because those restrictions had already been in place since 2011. And actually, from the period of 2017 to current, we went from 133 gallons per person per day in consumption to now to 106. So we've already reduced, just in the matter of within the last 6 years or so, 20% of our water use in Los Angeles. There may be a time for additional restrictions, but that time is not now. What the time for is now is our continued assistance to our customers in terms of rebates for their outdoor water use and indoor water use as well. So we continue to have a high level of rebates for removing your lawn into a more California-friendly landscape, as well as for indoor use significantly in washing machines. We also have a long-term strategy in the event that we do have, you know, a decade-long droughts and things like that, or lose aqueducts because of earthquakes in the form of Operation Next and Hyperion 2035. And those efforts were highlighted this week by a few segments done by Jacob Soperoff from NBC. The show, his segment was shown on the Today Show, Morning Joe, and the Chris Hayes Show. And he actually got to do something I have never been able to do, and that's to host his segment from on top of Terminal Hill at the top of the Cascade. So it was a great news piece for us. It's on YouTube, being seen by thousands. And so again, just to underscore, I think our customers, consumers, Angelenos, should be congratulated for efforts, and I would caution against supporting any kind of further restrictions because of those great efforts. Has seen great benefits in extra storage that will be able to get us through certainly this year, and likely if we have a continued dry period for at least another year or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. So lastly, I want to discuss something that a number of our speakers brought up today, and that was the issue of the impact on our ratepayers of the COVID pandemic. We certainly recognized early on that that many of our customers were facing hardships regarding lack of ability to go to work and the economy essentially shutting down in many sectors. And so initially back in the very beginning of the pandemic in March of a year ago, we issued a moratorium on disconnections and on collections. And that was announced by Mayor Garcetti. And then at some point, it was probably around the beginning of the end of last calendar year, we talked about having continuing that disconnections, cessation of disconnections until April 30th, which is now just about upon us. So recognizing that the economy is now just beginning to recover, and as many of the speakers talked about, many of our customers are still facing hardships and getting back on their feet, that absent any reservations or different recommendations from the board, it would be my plan at this point to let the board know that I would intend to keep the moratorium on shutoffs and disconnections in place until September 1st. At September 1st, that we would begin our process of late notices and starting activities. Not that on September 1st people would be shut off who are late, but we would actually at that point resume the process of working with our customers who are in arrears. And so obviously it does beg the question of what assistance is there for customers. What programs can we come up with, and how can we find help for our ratepayers who need that? We are continuing to look at that issue very aggressively. Nancy Sutley can bring us up to speed a little bit on what's going on in those efforts. I know that there's actually hearings going on today in the state that may play into relief for some of our customers. But unless the board has recommendations otherwise, it might be my recommendation at this point that the last date we put out, April 30th, be extended at this point until September 1st, at which time we would hopefully be very well situated and to assist our customers and to begin our normal process of looking at late notices and collection activities and hopefully having everyone back on their feet so that there are no shutoffs at all. Nancy, would you like to add what's going on and what we would plan to do, bring to the board in May?
Yeah, so we plan to come back in May with some additional recommendations around debt management and potential debt relief. We've joined with other members of the California Municipal Utilities Association in asking the state to provide funding to deal with utility arrears. CMUA has requested $1 billion out of the state sort of one-time surplus, and we've gotten some very positive feedback from the legislative leadership and others in Sacramento about that request, and we have been working with our delegation as well to support that request. So we're hopeful that by the time the legislature acts on the state budget, that we will have some certainty around some assistance for customers to deal with their arrearages. There's also been funding provided in both the CARES 2 that was passed at the end of last year and the American Rescue Plan passed by Congress in the beginning of this year. Both of those bills provided rental assistance, relief to individuals, as well as mortgage relief to individuals. But the guidance from the legislation stated it could be used for utility to pay utility bills, but the Treasury Department's guidance has been to look for other funding for that first before people use that specifically for utility bills. The Congress did supplement funding for an existing program called the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP, which has been around for many years, but funded at a relatively low level. So there will be additional money coming for that program. And the way that works is the money goes from the Federal Department of Health and Human Services to the states. So in California's case, to the Community Services Department, who then works with a number of community-based organizations in each county that determine eligibility and enroll people in that program. And then they're in contact with us once people are enrolled, and we give them a credit on their bill in the amount funded by LIHEAP. So we're awaiting that additional funding coming from DC to Sacramento and eventually to us or to Los Angeles. And for the first time, the Congress in both the CARES 2 and in the American Rescue Plan created a similar program specifically for water and wastewater assistance. So a low-income home water and wastewater assistance program. And we expect that the structure will be similar, that it will come first to the state and then to individuals in each county. But we're still awaiting the final guidance from the Department of Health and Human Services. And we've been monitoring that closely and working, participating in workshops around that. So the exact amounts that will come to California and eventually come to Los Angeles, we're still awaiting the final determination of those. But in the past, under LIHEAP, it's provided for about, in a typical year, we get about 20,000 of our customers enrolled in it, and they get $400 or $500 as a credit. So we're hopeful with these expanded amounts that assistance will reach more people, reach more customers. But the eligibility determination is made by both the congressional guidance as well as guidance from the federal agencies. So those are sort of the big pots of money that we're looking at. And as I said, we're hopeful to have some good news from Sacramento shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. So we will continue to work very diligently on that, recognizing this is a very important issue for our customers. And I expect in May that a lot of things are developing literally right now, both at the federal and state level. So I expect in May we'll have a report and a plan for the board as to how we would move forward to help our customers out before that September 1st date. Very last thing I have to say today, I apologize for the long report, is today is, this is the last board meeting, the last week for Sharon Grove, who's the Director of Customer Services. Sharon came to us about 9 years ago, and she worked in a couple other utilities in the customer service area and came during a very critical time for us that we were trying to improve our call center operations. We were getting ready to launch our CCB, which then became pretty all-consuming for several years of Sharon's life, and meeting customer expectations, dramatically increasing the size of our call center, and working on customer wait times. So I want to thank Sharon for her years of service and for the work that she's done here. And this is her final week of the department, so wish her well and congratulate her on her retirement. So, and with that, that's the conclusion of my report.
Thank you, Marty. I have a list of questions and comments, but I want to first go around to see if there are other commissioners with questions and or comments. I see Commissioner Reyes with hand up first. Commissioner Reyes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Nancy, for the heads up on the funding. I just want to let you know that on the LIHEAP, talking with our providers of LIHEAP, that 75% of the LIHEAP monies provided to LA County, 75% of those go to our LADWP customers who need the assistance. So that is really important for us to follow up and make sure that the funding goes through, and that the water and wastewater assistance program is also very important, because we're talking now more and more about water equity and the issues that our customers have, especially in the vulnerable populations. The other thing is for a question for Marty about the return to work, as to when is your plan for staggering the return to work, and how flexible are you with the date that you mentioned? And the other thing is that we know that remote work works, and expecting, a back to normal, like a pre-pandemic, is not really that realistic. I wanted more clarity about your plan, and also more flexibility, because I would like to see how you will address having more people specifically at the JFB. Are you going to do temperature checks? Are you going to be doing testing? What are you going to do with folks who may not be vaccinated or refuse to be vaccinated? Those are nuances that are going to be hopefully addressed in detail with your plan. So in essence, that's really what I would like to see when you say that there is like a return to work program.
We will have all that, and that's being worked on now. We'll have a lot more detail very shortly on exactly how we would try to execute this.
Any more questions or comments from board members?
Whoa. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
yes.
Good morning, I guess it is. Thank you, Commissioner Reyes. I was going to ask some of those questions. But I have we're all getting a letter, or have gotten a letter from the community, from Community Gardens Association, and it's been brought to my attention that a lot of the community gardens cannot afford their water bills, the ones that are in the DWP, and there's basically an agreement between DWP and Recreation and Parks and the Community Gardens Group. And so I would think we would want to work something out with them and try to help them with some of the funding that Nancy's been mentioning, Nancy Sutley. So I just get it out there. I know there's for me, it's been very frustrating and sad to hear, given that people are really committed to these, to the growing of the fruits and vegetables, and it's been a 15-year effort that's been ongoing, and they're just really strapped and stressed, and I would hate to think that we can't solve something or help them out in some way.
Thank you. We will look into that issue and look for solutions. It has been a long-term problem since the gardens first became a regular site in Los Angeles, and we'll come back with some suggestions for how we can.
Yes. I know at least in one garden, it's an issue of, unfortunately, sadly enough, it's about the water being used by the homeless at night to take showers. So there's going to have to be a little bit of focus with the sort of the groups that are fortunately you can go to the Community Garden Council and Rec and Parks and sort of try to sift it through there. You don't have to go to all 20 gardens and try to figure it out. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Laird. Commissioner Berard, did you have any comment or question at this time?
I don't see her on.
All right. Then I see Commissioner NEEMAN Brady. He doesn't appear to have anything. So a couple things. First, with respect to the incident this early morning involving our employees, I just want to acknowledge sincere concern regarding that event, and to note that we will be having a corporate safety update. When corporate safety previously presented, I'd indicated that that would become a regular item before the board at regular intervals. So at least twice a year, this will be June and towards the end of the year. At that time, and as a part of that, in addition to looking at incidences that have occurred over the period since they last presented, which I know include both water and power, and additional benchmarking, I do believe that would be useful to bring for the board examples of the PPE and other equipment that members of our department are, utilizing in order to mitigate impacts from accidents. It's difficult to fully appreciate what people in the field do and what it means to do it without some visual references. So I look forward to that, and that report will be on the agenda before June 30th. In the meantime, please keep us up to date on the condition of our employees. I share the stated questions regarding the return to work plan. I note that there was a pretty long bulletin that was issued with all employees, I think in all caps, followed by a number of caveats, including some notion that that may not include customer service. So it was somewhat confusing, a little more confusing than illuminating from my perspective. So I am very interested in understanding before the end of May, frankly, because I do believe that we need to be able to provide clear guidance to our employees as to what they should expect in June, understanding, who will be returning, what criteria is used for determining who comes back and who doesn't. If it's all, then I assume it's all. If it's not all, then let's not say that. Also, it's going to be critical to have some policy in place with respect to employees who have not been vaccinated or, for whatever reason. But absent a vaccine, COVID is still a manifest risk. If employee returns will be staggered, that needs to be sort of spelled out as well. I do understand that you are in touch with both labor organizations, but when you come back with the plan, I'd like there to be real clarity around, how this is being executed and buy-in from all parties. On the cessation or the continued moratorium on collecting bills and shutoffs, it was my understanding, or at least I believe that would be through September 30th, not September 1st. And I would certainly recommend that we just set September 30th as the date, given the level of uncertainty at this moment as to what level of resources will be available to assist customers. Also, what level of where we are with respect to our CCB, both updates and additional refinements to the system that would perhaps permit for monthly billing or level pay, or there are just a number of issues around technology, communication, and resources that we're going to need to nail down. And there should be some period of outreach and transition. So my hope would be that we would be in a position to fully implement a program that returns our billing practices and collection practices not to normal, but to something better than normal or better than before. And that we will know that we have that done and be able to roll it out or begin rolling it out by the last quarter of the year. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on that, but appreciate that the moratorium is being extended, and look forward to that report in May with recommendations as to how we would transition over. I think that's all, except to note one thing, and that is appreciate Reiko's update, especially on the award that the department, or the recent recognition of the department's power system. It was, telling or sort of noteworthy to me that the values or the principles that are being highlighted and kind of reiterated over and over relate to reliability, equity, environmental justice, and affordability. And I simply want to say that I appreciate that those words, especially as it relates to equity, environmental justice, affordability, that those are not just concepts, but those words have to be translated into meaningful action. I appreciate the ongoing work of our power system, water system, in fact, every member of this department to grapple with how we make those words meaningful as we move forward. And just thought that it merited some additional reinforcement, since I'm not certain that 5 years ago, or even, in a serious way, less than that equity, environmental justice would have stood side by side with reliability. So I appreciate that expansion of the lens. And then finally, with respect to the community garden situation, this is the second time that Commissioner LEHRER has made the point regarding concerns and stresses on community gardens. Would appreciate a formal report back to this board by the end of May, with some expansion around these issues, or some detail around these issues. Also, the extent to which the department can play a role in addressing the unique concerns and challenges of community gardens. That would be very helpful.
Certainly.
Is there anything more? Okay, with that, we will move to item 4. There are no motions for future consideration that are being introduced at this time that I'm aware of. Dr. Pickle, item 5, would you like to make comments at this time, or would you will you be delaying those comments until some other part of the agenda?
I will be making brief comments now. One, the OPA has released a report on the DWP preliminary budget, and that is on the DWP website under this agenda item 5, and it was also provided to the board members in their packets. It is not light reading, but we recommend you look at least the beginning and the last 2 sections. And if you have questions, we're available for briefing on these issues before the agenda comes up again. And then second, I have a presentation at item 8A on the OPA, which I'll address then. If any other items come up for question, we may have comments to help. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Are there any neighborhood impact statements under item 6, Board Secretary?
No community impact statements or formal positions were filed by any neighborhood councils on the items on today's agenda.
Okay, thank you. We're at item number 7, and we'll be removing 2 items from the current agenda. Item 11 and item 16. Are there any other items that are being removed for or being called special? Okay, if none, I'd entertain a motion for the remaining items. Items 10, 11.
President McCLAIN-HILL.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10, yes. 10, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. Is there a motion to approve?
I move approval of those items named.
Is there a second?
Second.
Would you please call the roll?
President McCLAIN-HILL.
Aye.
Vice President Reyes.
Aye.
Commissioner BARAD.
Aye.
Commissioner LEHRER.
Aye.
Commissioner NEEMAN BRADY.
Aye.
5 ayes. It's passed.
Thank
Excuse me,
you.
President McCLAIN-HILL. I
Yes.
don't know if number 12, item 12 was included in there. I don't think that was called.
I thought that I read item 12, but why don't we just move to approve item 12 just in case?
Motion for item 12?
I move that we approve item 12. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any objection?
No.
Without objection, item 12 is also approved on consent. We can now move to item 8, A, and that would be a presentation from the Ratepayer Advocates Office.
Thank you, Steve. Next slide, please. There was an extended discussion from the early aughts until 2011 on setting up a ratepayer advocate or a inspector general related to DWP. The final decision was to establish a Office of Public Accountability Ratepayer Advocate via a charter amendment in March 2011. The box on the left cites the key aspects of that charter amendment. The role of the OPA is to provide public independent analysis of actions related to water and power rates. And there were some basic instructions for the executive director to report to the board but not be instructed by it, to administer OPA affairs, to manage OPA employees subject to civil service, to prepare an annual budget, expend the funds, including without limitation awarding contracts, and that's a key component, which I'll discuss later, and perform other duties as prescribed by ordinance. The OPA shall issue reports. Since the ballot measures in favor argument was unopposed, we were advised by city attorney that we could also look in detail at the in favor argument, and that offered additional insight as to how we establish the OPA. First was to bring greater transparency to DWP. The history was DWP had not implemented recommendations of outside experts in a number of cases, and the signers of that in favor statement thought more transparency was needed on operations, finances, strategy, and long-term plans. Second component was to hold DWP accountable more to its customers, shed greater light on operations and finances, and to be an independent watchdog charged with analyzing rates. Another component of this was to judge consumer protection. And that next slide was coupled with industry knowledge, utility knowledge related to the long-term investment cycle with technical, business, financial, and political risks. The long-term arc on environmental management, the need for high reliability, and the different financial structures of private investor-owned utilities versus public utilities. With investor-owned utilities, the investor-owned utilities can be required to pay the price of bad decisions. And with publicly owned utilities, all costs are carried by the ratepayers, bad or not. The second component is lessons from the regulation of utilities. Regulation of utilities was based on the regulation that had started in the late 1800s related to railroads. First component of that was non-discriminatory service. If you use the service in a certain way, you'll be charged similarly to others using a service in that way. The next component is a standard of just and reasonable for the rates. Third is the standards for determining revenue requirements. Investor-owned utilities include a return for shareholders, but publicly owned utilities do not. But in California, publicly owned utilities are sharply delimited in terms of how they charge by Prop 218 and 26. And there has developed over this 100-year period, and in particular over the last 40 years, standards for rate structure and determining cost of service. Next page. The end result is using this utility and regulatory knowledge, the ballot statement in favor and the charter amendment were used in a working group of the CAO, the CLA, my office, and the city attorney to develop an implementing ordinance. In that implementing ordinance, it highlighted the mission of the OPA, and these more detailed components drive our actions on a regular basis. One is to improve DWP by analyzing and reporting on the reasonableness of rates and strategic plans and other DWP policies, procedures, decisions, contracts, and programs. The second is part of our mission is to provide information and recommendations to the DWP board, council, mayor, neighborhood councils, and the public. And finally, provide information and advice at request to DWP, the mayor, and council. It reiterated the authority of the executive director from the charter. And next page. There were reporting obligations, detailing reporting obligations springing from the charter. One is reports to the DWP board, council, mayor, neighborhood councils, and public on the reasonableness of rate actions and modifications. And the word reasonableness in this context was intentional and important in that reasonableness is a common standard in utilities, and really the bar for rates and rate actions is, are they reasonable? Second, to provide information to the board, council, the mayor, the neighborhood councils, and the public on long-term strategic plans, proposed DWP budget, policies, practices, programs, contracts, and other actions that impact rates. And we provide a materiality standard when we look at things typically, but we also think about precedents in that process. We have discretion to make recommendations to the board, the council, the mayor, and the public on improving reasonableness and transparency of DWP policy and rates. And we're required to maintain a public repository of OPA reports, and that's at our website, which is opa.lacity.org. And on consumer protection and complaints, we have the discretion to review individual customer accounts and make recommendations concerning customer service performance. So really, we will look at specific complaints, not all complaints, for the purposes of making recommendations about customer service report performance at DWP. Next page. The office has special powers and also has special challenges. It is a very independent office. It has its budget prepared once per year through the council. DWP is obligated to pay for the costs of the OPA, and the director is appointed by a citizens committee and approved by the mayor and council on a 5-year cycle. Part of our special powers is we have the flexibility to focus on material impacts and rates. We're not an inspector general. In the drafting of the charter amendment, inspector general was specifically stricken from the list. We can contract without mayor or council approval if it is in the budget and it is for less than 3 years. And we have access to information needed to fulfill OPA's responsibilities. And keeping in mind, the city is a single legal entity. Special challenges we have. There is, as in any deliberative process, there's a tension between transparency and reporting obligations and topics considered confidential, closed session issues, or the legally privileged. And as background to this, protracted litigation is common in utilities. And we believe our scope is internal to the city unless agreed otherwise by the key components that watch over OPA or participate with OPA. And finally, the size of our organization. Next chart. I'm sorry, our typical work schedule. We try to work with DWP in advance of proposals on rates, budgets, long-term plans, and projects. Part of doing this is we have a bi-weekly meeting between the OPA and the DWP Financial Services Group, but we also meet regularly with others within DWP. We track and participate in meetings of the DWP board, typically twice a month. The Council Energy, Climate Change, Environmental and Justice and River Committee, typically 2 times a month. We monitor DWP items before the council, typically 2 to 3 times a month. And we participate in special groups like the NREL 100% study, the Strategic Long-Term Planning study, and the Urban Water Management Plan. We also do intra-city coordination on rates, often 2 times per month between the analytical parts of the city, CLA, CAO, our office, and DWP when there's an active rate review to make sure all parties are up to date and informed. And then next slide. We have 9 positions in the office. Currently 3 are filled. We lost 1 person to the city separation incentive program in February. And we have 1 of the vacant positions filled by a 120-day appointment with a retired CAO employee who helps us with budget and other administrative matters. We are going out or having in process a contract to hire up to 3 additional staff members. And we also are in process for trying to replace our administrative assistant in spite of hurdles related to this separation incentive program. Any questions?
I certainly have a few questions and comments, but would like to determine if there are any board members that have questions or comments about this presentation.
Yes.
Commissioner Berard?
Thank you. I have a question. I read your report, and the way I interpreted it, and I wanted you to tell me if I interpreted this correctly, is that we don't have the budget for hiring additional personnel.
That's correct. And that additional personnel is needed to maintain levels of service on particularly matters related to O&M.
So what is your advice about the enhanced budget and additional personnel? What would you recommend that we do? How do we look at this?
Well, one, the advice was in part to DWP, and as they're trying to prepare the final budget, so there will be ongoing discussions about that. But our concern was, in spite of the likely impact of that increased O&M on rates, to maintain service levels, especially because there's the potential for a snap economic recovery, and we would have to be addressing that snap economic recovery. We need people to do it, and hiring that number of people in this time period will not be easy as well. So we might recommend putting that amount in the budget, but it will be challenging to spend it. But the increased the levels of service that are likely to be required will drive the need for that.
Okay. I think my comment would be that at our board meetings, I would like to have more proactive advice from you, rather than saying, you know, you did this and that's not going to work. I'd rather have to hear you say, to kind of warn us or to tell us what the implications are of our motions, or, you know, I think that would be helpful.
Can we go back to slide 5?
Go right ahead. Yes.
6. Part of the reason we work with DWP in advance of proposals on rates, budgets, and long-term plans and projects, often before things come to the board, there's a long preparation period, and we find we can be more effective if we've commented on those plans in advance before they're locked in concrete or locked in potential contracts. So often those discussions are not included. We could comment on things where we've weighed in the past, so the board is aware of that. But our process is to try to address things early.
Yes.
Before they've reached the board.
I think that's a good idea, and I think that would be very helpful for us, is to look at it early. Yeah, because a lot of what you're working on is very complex, and some of us don't have the background in putting that all together.
What I was saying by working in advance is our office works in advance as much as possible with DWP on these things. Having it come to the board early, I don't think I got to think through the process on that. And
yeah, I think, Fred, that because I certainly understand where Commissioner Berard is coming from, and as we continue to seek to leverage both your expertise and insight, you know, we talk about transparency a lot. It would be useful for there to be greater transparency around your work with the department. And so perhaps there might be periodic reports around those items as a part of your biweekly report to the board, or where you are on the agenda, that we might have a report on the highlighting those items that you were engaged with the department on, so that we know as you are providing advice to the department, at least from a topic perspective, those significant areas where you are engaged, which might also give board members an opportunity or the sort of a heads up that we might want some additional information from you and the department about those items as they are being worked through. That would go a long way toward enhancing our own understanding of some of the technical things that are occurring, and give us an opportunity to better appreciate what it is we're acting upon. Because sometimes when it just comes to us as a fully baked thing, it's been fully baked outside of our presence, and it's difficult at that time to catch up all at once. So it's much easier if we are periodically engaging on some of the more significant and significant and impactful matters that you were working on with the department.
Yes, thank you, President McCLAIN-HILL. That's very helpful. Yes, that's what I mean. I think that at our meetings, that if you could kind of move along with us more, that would be helpful.
Okay.
And we can sort of talk about what that might look like. I understand thinking about it a little differently.
Yeah.
We will we'll discuss with both of you some of the opportunities to do that and improve that process.
Good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, thank you. I just want to say that a couple things. I asked for this item to be placed on the agenda to reinforce and to provide greater perspective around the role of the OPA, how it came about, and the office's relationship both to our board and to the rest of the city leadership as it relates to DWP oversight. I know that, and I have found them to be exceptionally helpful, but I do inquire quite a lot and invite the OPA, invite both Fred and Camden to join me in meetings with the department on a range of items, as you know, as a party that can ask often more pointed or more insightful questions than I can ask, because of their expertise and background. I did want to talk a little bit about the challenges that you cited, and also sort of the special powers, where you talk about access to information to fulfill OPA responsibilities, and note that the city is a single legal entity. I just want to make sure that I understand that comment correctly. I assume the reference to being a single legal entity relates to legal privilege in connection with information that you become aware of in the context of working with the department. Is that what that's a reference to?
Yes, but there are also other things that require careful treatment, like CPRA requests and various closed session matters.
Okay, no, thank you. So, but as a single legal entity, you operate with the same level of privilege, confidentiality, et cetera. For instance, we're not breaking confidentiality or privilege were we to provide you with information regarding actions that we're taking or discussions that we're having.
That's my understanding, but I defer to the city attorney on those interpretations.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I know that we previously discussed and I ask these questions in part because from time to time in meetings with staff, Marty, I will hear some hesitancy about, letting the OPA in on some items. And typically, if I'm having a meeting with staff about something, it's not a small thing. And I, will remind them that the OPA, reports to the board and has the same privilege and is required to maintain the same level of confidentiality. I mean, they're as the rest of us. So I did want to just make a note of that particular sort of factor as it relates to the way in which the department works with the OPA. If it's something that I, as a board president, am aware of, and it's certainly something that the OPA can be aware of. And I just wanted to make that point in public. And also, I recall, at least I thought I recall, I think I recall, that the department and the OPA were advised to create a formal document regarding the sharing of information. Is that something that I recall that happening in January and wondered if there had been any progress toward that?
I'm not convinced that a more formal, detailed document helps. I think what's important is there's a basic charter requirement that the OPA have access to information needed to do its job, and OPA is its own judge of what's necessary to do its job. I worry about a more detailed document being perceived of as more restrictive. And the fact that over now a 9-year period, we really haven't had to go to the mat on any information. And the process has gotten quicker.
I do understand that has occurred. I think that I will work with you and Marty and come back to this at a future date. My concern is as follows. There are charter documents, and then there is the implementation of that on a policy basis. And from my perspective, we want to ensure that the structure exists irrespective of the personalities involved. And I am aware that the personalities involved have in the past played a role in access to information at this department. I know that the board has taken steps to mitigate that, but I do want to make sure that there are no further steps that are required because it's an important function. Being in a position to provide both independent and expert advice to the board and to city leaders is critical, and having the information in a timely and unfettered way to do that is also critical. The final thing I will say is that I know that there is currently underway some thinking about customer service and want to make sure that the OPA's office is involved in those discussions as we move forward, because I think they both have a role and some important perspective around that. I want to acknowledge the significant help that the OPA's office has played as we seek to move forward our technology resources from a personnel perspective, both in terms of educating internal education at the department in terms of, supporting what's needed or thinking around what's needed, but also critically as an independent voice at City Hall in helping to set some perspective around what the department will be required to do from an HR perspective in order to meet its technology needs going forward. So I did want to just make those quick points. I know that the next, and I will leave that, I know that the next presentation, which includes two outside parties, Mono Lake Committee and California Trout, is going to take a little time, and that I often forget about breaks. So So in light of that, I wondered if now might not be a good time for a break before we begin that presentation. And I'm open to recommendations. Is 15 minutes good, or do we want to do 20? I just need some feedback. 15. Okay, I'm seeing nods around 15. So we will take a 15-minute sort of pause or
I vote for 20. But I do want to say to Mr. Pickell that I am like, and I'm so appreciative, President McCLAIN-HILL, for you having instituted this presentation. I'm really sort of impressed by the amount of responsibilities you have and the amount of meetings that you have to participate in. Good God, I mean, it's really stunning, the reach of the work that you do. So thank you. It's appreciated, and I vote for help. You need help. You need to fill your those positions, and there anybody who gets any one of those positions has a really interesting road ahead in their career. So
Yeah, I would like to say first, we're available to offer you advice on any questions or comments you have anytime you want. Call us. We'll send you our cell phones. Steve, could you flip forward one more slide to 7? Grant Hogue is a water specialist and has experience working with over 50 utilities in water and wastewater and stormwater, everywhere from Saudi Arabia to Guam, but mostly in the Western U.S. Camden Collins is a lawyer as well as having an MBA and a computer science undergraduate background, and she's worked in various sectors, in litigation, as a lawyer and as an energy advisor at the PUC, and working for Bechtel and consulting firms in this area. So she has extensive industry experience from multiple perspectives. And my background is background in engineering economics from Harvey Mudd College. With a name like Pickle, how could I pass that up? And MIT with a doctorate in the same area, and experience in electric utilities, gas utilities, and consulting.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So senior experts, and we're going to try to add more senior experts to the team.
Yes, yes. And by the way, I only know Opa as a grandfather in German, so I kept on getting confused. Opa. Okay.
Well,
anyway.
Thank you for that. It is 11:44, so we're going to break until noon, and we'll resume our meeting at noon. And I appreciate the report, Dr. Pickle. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a bit.
Please remain silent until all mics are turned off.
Sir.
We are recording.
Terrific. Yvette, would you please take the roll?
Yes, President McCLAIN-HILL,
Present.
Vice President Reyes,
Present.
Commissioner NEEMAN Brady,
Present.
Commissioner LEHRER, Commissioner BARAD. We have a quorum.
Okay, terrific. The next item on the agenda is item 8B. Marty, should I turn this over to you to kick off the presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. So item 8B is a presentation which leads up to the vote in item 16. This is the board's consideration of mitigated negative declaration, which is the appropriate CEQA document supporting our application to amend and renew our water rights licenses in the Mono Basin. Just for a very brief background, so there's two parts to this in the petition to the State Water Resources Control Board. It's the renewal of the water diversion and license and the Mono Lake surface elevation criteria that confirms, the use of our water rights and sending the water to LA. This is goes back to the original license in 1994, and then also revision of stream flow criteria for the Mono Basin tributary streams to comply with the new science work that was done by state-appointed stream scientists that are looking at a new stream flow regimen that would then be more beneficial to the ecosystem in the Mono Basin. Just for quick reference, so our Mono diversions go back to 1940, and then there was a lawsuit in 1994 regarding the public trust doctrine. Very famous cases that a lot of environmental law was based on was the Mono Lake case. It resulted in an amendment to our license in 1994. As part of that amendment, it was understood that we would do further study in conjunction with other parties around the lake on the restoration of the streams, with the idea that we'd modify stream flows in the future. And so, and there's a decision called Decision 1631.
Marty, are you previewing the presentation?
Very quickly, D1631, but it was a systematic and comprehensive approach to balancing all the beneficial uses of water. And so we were presenting the science and the technical work that's been done to support the amended license, and you'll be hearing that from our experts today. So with that, we do have invited the settling parties that were involved with us for several years. We have 4 parties ourselves, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, California Trout, and the Mono Lake Committee. And I know that California Trout and the Mono Lake Committee are prepared to offer some comments to the board at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty, and I'm very pleased that we are able to accommodate the Mono Lake Committee and California Trout at today's meeting, and very much looking forward to their comments. Take note of the support coming from Mono Lake's political leadership, and happy that we are at this point in our journey today. Who is representing the Mono Lake and Cal Trout? Is that, if you would identify your, I see Jeff.
I think we've got both groups here, and we talked earlier, and I might go first if that's all right.
Thank you very much, sir. You have the floor.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for this opportunity. I am Jeff McQuilkin. I was going to say good morning. I'll say good lunchtime. I'm the executive director of the Mono Lake Committee, and I've worked on this project with Marty and the state board from the beginning of it, and it's been quite a journey. We really thank you, President McCLAIN-HILL and commissioners and Marty for inviting us to be part of the important agenda item today. The committee is a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to protecting and restoring Mono Lake and its tributary streams. And we and our thousands of members have been engaged with the Department of Water and Power for over 40 years on issues of water export and restoration in the Mono Basin. We can't help mention we also proudly host an outdoor education program that brings Los Angeles youth up to Mono Lake for week-long experiences to learn about their source of water and value water conservation, and we do that in collaboration with the department. I did bring some slides with me today, and Steve, if it's possible to advance to the first one, that would be great. Thank you. We are delighted that stream restoration is moving forward. There is recovery work to be accomplished, and this action will take a huge step toward achieving the State Water Board's restoration goals in the Mono Basin. Thank you, Commission, for making this happen. You'll hear about Mono Lake today as well. I do want to be clear that the important matter of restoring Mono Lake is separate from the stream restoration process that's under discussion here. Indeed, as we work together to make progress in recovering the health of Rush, Lee Vining, Walker, and Parker Creeks, we can also see that we have a lot of stewardship work to do together in the future. The next slide, please. So today's action advances a science-driven stream restoration in the Mono Basin, healing the damage done in the past by excessive water diversions. That damage took place between the 1940s and the 1980s, before any of us here were involved. This is a photo, though, illustrating that. This is Lee Vining Creek, the lower section in the 1970s. And you can see the problem that the restoration program is designed to heal. Specifically, you might have a hard time figuring out where the creek is in this photo because it was dry due to the full diversion of the stream, and the riparian forest had collapsed around. In contrast, if we can see the next slide, we've got Lee Vining Creek in the 2010s here, and you can see that with the return to flow and the delivery of water in a pattern that's similar to what's natural for snowmelt streams in our area, we're seeing some rejuvenation and restoration. This photo really illustrates that. This is from about 6 or 7 years ago. This ties into the aqueduct. If we go to the next slide. This is the Lee Vining Aqueduct intake on Lee Vining Creek. And the key thing about this is that it's been modified. This was done some years ago, and you can see the gate in the middle there. And the infrastructure itself has been changed to be able to provide reliable stream restoration flows, in addition to operating reliably for the aqueduct operations itself. Get the next slide. That modernization from Lee Vining Creek is kind of the template of what will happen on a much bigger scale, what this project will deliver at Grant Dam. This spillway modification will take infrastructure that was designed really 100 years ago, and it was designed for the continuous and full diversion of Rush Creek. And it's going to transform it into 21st century, much greener aqueduct infrastructure that can do what the aqueduct needs, while at the same time operating in a way that restores the health of Rush Creek. Exciting. The continuous use of science to design stream restoration measures and monitor the recovery of the fish populations and the stream channel geomorphology has been essential to the progress made in figuring out what needs to be done. I'd like to offer thanks to the State Water Board's independent stream scientists, Marty mentioned them, Bill Trush and Ross Taylor, who have worked with all of us over many years, guided us all, and put in a tremendous amount of work on measures. Next slide, please. So collaboration, all about collaboration. The State Water Board mandate for stream restoration did set the goals for the restoration programs, and it put them right into the water licenses of the City of Los Angeles. But what's notable today is that we are looking at a plan for next steps that was developed through a collaborative process. LADWP and the Mono Lake Committee, CalTrout, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife were able to sit down in 2011 with the State Board's approval, and we took a detailed look at the restoration actions that were called for by the State Board scientists, and then we were able to figure out a way to overcome the feasibility concerns that DWP had raised at the time, and we were able to craft a package of restoration actions that delivers on the science and does so in a workable and functional manner. All of that led to the settlement agreement in 2013, which we've jointly submitted to the State Water Board as a recommendation on how to implement this new and exciting phase of stream restoration. We celebrated that, as you can see in the slide. Ron Nichols, former General Manager Ron Nichols here, and several others of us who were involved in the discussions along the way. And we actually planted some trees on the banks of Rush Creek that day in the fall of 2013. So I think today's progress is also exciting because it's going to illustrate that voluntary agreements like these, collaborations, can lead to positive outcomes on the ground. The aqueduct itself creates an extended watershed that links Los Angeles and Mono Lake, and that connection means that in the years ahead, certainly we at the committee and LADWP and regional parties and agencies and tribes have plenty more to collaborate on. For example, the State Water Board mandated raising Mono Lake to a sustainable management level. And to be clear, that critical action is not a topic in the 2013 settlement agreement or the current board process. Those are focused on stream restoration, but the lake is low and collaboration on the path forward will definitely be needed. Statewide drought will cause the lake to fall at least a foot this year, highlighting the ecological risks for the lake ecosystem and nesting birds and air quality problems. We appreciate the lake level modeling work that was done by Mike Diaz and the DWP consultants as a portion of this stream restoration materials before you. We see it as a jump start for looking into this important issue. Last slide, if we could. Plenty of stream restoration collaboration to do as we go forward and probably get started this summer or fall. List here, there are some more things, but implementation, of course, of the spillway modification project. There's a new jointly run monitoring administration team. New operations plan needs to be developed to take into account the new facilities capabilities. And the agreement has ways to incorporate annual science-based adaptive management into operations. So those are all exciting things. I think that's my last slide there, Steve. In closing, what I would say is the Mono Lake Committee supports adoption of the M&D document today. We thank you, commissioners and LADWP, for taking a huge step forward with the restoration of 20 miles of Rush, Levining, Parker, and Walker Creeks in the Mono Basin. We look forward to continuing to work together to restore these streams and address Mono Lake's low level to create a sustainable future in the Mono Basin, a task that is especially important in this time of climate change. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today, and I know Cal Trout is ready to talk, but I'd be happy to answer questions or discuss at any time you like to.
Thank you. We'll reserve our questions until the end of the presentation. Appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
And who is representing Cal Trout?
I think we have a couple of us today. I'll start off. This is Reggie Collins with California Trout. I'm Cal Trout's Policy and Legal Director, and Richard Collins will be following up, which is patented razzing and history lesson, which you all get in a moment. Just want to briefly introduce Cal Trout. We've been around for 50 years. We have 6 regions around the state, ranging from Southern California up to where I am, up in Mount Shasta. And we're committed to protecting our freshwater resources for fish, water, and people. Something about Cal Trout that I really enjoy is that we pride ourselves in our non-traditional partnerships that really transcend the traditional conservation relationships that you often see. I think that our partnership with LADWP is no different. We enthusiastically support the approval of this project to amend DWP's mono basin water rights, along with the adoption of the MND. This is a major achievement, and we urge the department to preserve this working relationship past the implementation and continue to shift this perception of any type of conflict between LADWP and conservation interests. I think we're a great example of why that can be a really positive relationship, and I think that the implementation shouldn't stop our work moving forward. And we appreciate especially the work done by Marty and Dave Edwards and others to find that solution that works for both parties. These negotiations are never easy, especially with our needs necessitating the concessions of the other parties. And I really look forward to working with you all in the future, especially when our contentious conversations can be finished off with a beer rather than logging up on Zoom. So with that, I'll pass it over to Richard, who can give a little bit more of a detailed look at our history.
Reggie, thank you. President McCLAIN-HILL, Vice President Reyes, Commissioners. I'm Richard Bruce Collins, outside counsel for California Trout. I've had the honor of representing California Trout in the Mono Lake cases since 1991. The project, if approved today, will be the end of a very long road. The Mono Lake cases started in 1978, challenging DWP's rights to divert all natural flows from the tributary streams to the lake. In 1983, for the first time in the state's history, the California Supreme Court held that water rights, even municipal, must be used to avoid unnecessary damage to public trust resources, including streams. In 1994, the State Water Board decided Decision 1631, amending your water rights to set a management level for the lake and also to establish a restoration program for the streams. That restoration program was preliminary, subject to change on the basis of studies and monitoring results. The project before you today proposes to implement a 2013 settlement. If you approve this settlement today, approve the project today, the State Water Board will shortly take final action to amend DWP's water rights consistent with the settlement. This will be the final change in the stream restoration program that the State Water Board started in its decision 1631 back in 1994. The board will not require more stream restoration involving more water or more money under that decision. On the legal side, the State Water Board will consolidate your water rights into living licenses. While the terms of these water rights are currently found in multiple decisions and orders across the decades, all of the terms will be stated in one document going forward. This will assure the transparency of these water rights. This will be the first time the State Water Board has ever done this. And separate from this project, let me mention that DWP has also supported a pilot to digitize all of the State Water Board's official records related to these water rights, again for the sake of transparency. This is also a first, as 99% of the official records for water rights in this state are still paper. The stream restoration program will continue as a requirement of your water rights. And of course, the State Water Board retains its general authority to require changes in those water rights in the future. That authority applies to all water rights by statute. Steve, could you bring up my first slide? Your meeting began with an acknowledgement that your people do vital, difficult, and often dangerous work. Let me close by acknowledging the work of your staff involved in this settlement. General Manager Adams brought his creativity and boundless energy to the table. Here you see him at signing day 2013 at Grant Dam, pointing with his typical enthusiasm at something. Next slide. And right after the settlement was signed, Marty went right to work with 2 board members from the State Water Board in attendance, as well as other dignitaries, showing them how the spillway from Grant Dam might be modified in order to implement the settlement. Next slide. Next slide. And I also wish to acknowledge your Deputy City Attorney, David Edwards. He advanced your interest in finality of the stream restoration program while also working to define a project acceptable to other parties. You see here he's collaborating with Cal Trout, and thank you for that. I also wish to acknowledge Anselmo Collins, Jane Hopman, Jim Yanada, Mark Sedlicek, and your consultants and others who contributed. Their efforts were instrumental in getting us here to this day. So in closing, Cal Trout encourages you to approve the project that is before you, and we thank you for getting us to this point where stream restoration of the Mono Lake cases will be completed. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. We appreciate your participation in the meeting and certainly invite you to stay until this item is fully complete in case there are questions or comments regarding your presentations, if that's okay. Now to staff.
I think Adam or Anselmo is going to begin the presentation. Go ahead.
Good morning, Marty. First speaker is going to be Mark Hanna and talk about the stream restoration efforts in Mono Basin.
All right, next slide. Hopefully you can hear me okay. My name is Mark Hanna. I work at JFB Consultants. I've been involved in the stream restoration program for nearly 2 decades up in the Mono Basin. And as Jeff, walked down memory lane, it's really nice to see the progress that's been made out there from some of those early photos to some of the later photos that have been shown. Here is another picture that has a pre-photo point of pretty much a desiccated system. And now you can see it's a very lush, riparian forest flowing in Upper Rush Creek. Next slide. And I also appreciated Richard's walk down, the actual timeline of when things occurred. I have one here I will just briefly touch on, and it's really focused on the stream restoration program, but it could be applied to lake levels and other things. But I'll focus a couple things on the stream systems themselves. Of course, LADWP wasn't the first entity to start managing water in the Mono Basin. In the late 1800s, all the way until 1940, there were increasing agricultural diversions and actual storage and then power generation occurred prior to LADWP's water rights being approved in 1940. The public trust suit was filed in the late 70s, and following a series of wet years and the pending lawsuits, continuous flows were really reintroduced back into the streams in 1986. Landmark decision 1631 in 1994, which Marty called D1631, really set the stage, and then identified a prescribed flow regime to be released down each of the creeks. In 1998, orders 9805 and 9807 were issued. 9805 actually changed the peak flow requirements, so adjusted the flows that were identified in 1994 to increase the peaks, and also established a monitoring program with Order 9807. After 12 years of those flows, the stream scientists issued the synthesis report in 2010. There was the facilitated process in 2011. The settlement agreement was signed in 2013. And here today, we're reviewing the environmental document that's under consideration by the board. Next slide, please. So going back to just post 1986, after flows were now continuously being released down the streams, you can see some of the older photos with debris and water, but not a lot of vegetation. These are both in Lower Rush Creek. Next slide, please. And 2 others showing some of the early restoration work and reforming of the stream channels, and then the outlet of Rush Creek flowing into Mono Lake in the right. So we've come a long ways. Next slide, please. A lot of the analyses that the stream scientists move forward with, and as have the other consultants, including myself and my team here at JFB, is really based on legal and science-oriented framework that's been laid out by the various decisions and orders. And really, Order 9807 had the monitoring program that had some targets that were established to really define when the restoration program would be done. Next slide, please. So moving into the current status, on the right, you can see, this is essentially where that opening photo was taken, but looking downstream at old 395 bridge in October of 1987, and then 30 years later, where the willow forest has regrown and created more confinement in the stream flows and more habitat. Really, through the implementation of those stream restoration flows through D1631 and Order 9805, I think this is a moment that we should all kind of, take take a breather and really recognize that this is a success story. Not only is the restoration program providing these environmental attributes, but the restoration compliance, right? The check boxes of all the things that need to be done is also complete. And the state-appointed stream scientists are recommending a new stream flow regime to really accelerate restoration. Next slide, please. So the progress report here on the right is a table that lists the tributaries, Rush Creek, Leevanning Creek, Parker Creek, and Walker Creek, and then the various metrics that have been measured over time. Acres of vegetation, we're talking about, over 2,000 acres of vegetation within these 4 tributaries leading up to Mono Lake, as well as a significant channel length that has been restored over time, and a fishery that really is a vibrant fishery. And really the total riparian acreage for these tributaries exceeds the established targets. The lengths are within those established targets, and that fishery condition is stable, productive, and self-sustaining. Really comparable to other stream systems, applicable stream systems there in the Eastern Sierras. Next slide. So with the implementation of the project in front of us today, really those expectations, currently the system is in a dynamic equilibrium. Dynamic meaning it can vary because of wet years and dry years, but it's within that equilibrium period. And the systems have been seeing these flows for the past 20, 25 years. This dynamic equilibrium will adjust now with an insertion of additional energy, which will adjust over the next several decades. During that adjustment period, again, temporary changes could include some stream degradation, right? Some erosive forces that might downcut the streams, which will then reduce floodplain access and groundwater. But really what we're seeing are these are potentially temporary effects, but overall these impacts, per the synthesis report, that the long-term effects will be beneficial to the stream ecosystems themselves. So this is a big moment. And moving to the next slide, we're really going to show here a video that takes kind of a broader look at LADWP's restoration work in Mono County. And you'll see some footage that showcases the successful stream restoration in Mono Basin that I just overviewed, as well as other environmental stewardship efforts in the region. Thank you. Video, please. Great. Mm-hmm.
Are we having trouble bringing up the video?
1 minute, please.
I think it's just a link in the PowerPoint, isn't it?
We can move on if we're having difficulty with this.
Yeah, I was going to say if we can move on and we can come back to the video once we've determined how to technically make it happen.
Do you want Carl to?
Okay.
Thank you.
Adam, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. If we can go back to the slideshow. I'm now seeing all the participants. Thank you, Steve. And there, perfect. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Adam Perez. I'm the manager of the aqueduct up here in lovely Bishop, California, and I'm going to go over the project description for the project. So just really quick, next slide, please.
I want to set the stage for the Mono Basin and Mono Lake and in the area that we're talking about. So, Mono Basin is located east Yosemite. Mono Lake, located in Mono Basin, is a terminal ancient saline lake. Terminal meaning that it has no outlet. There are 5 main tributary streams that feed into Mono Lake. City of Los Angeles owns water rights to Rush, Lee Vining, Parker, Walker, and also Mill Creek. Overall, typically the flows in the creek are higher in the spring and summer months and also low in the winter months. Next slide, please. The proposed project is the implementation of the 2 water right licenses. That's 10-191 and 10-192. So that is the project. We have the flow regime changes identified in the licenses is meant to enhance stream restoration in Mono Basin. So if you go to the next slide. So the project will be one of the largest environmental restoration projects in the state of California. The project will fulfill LADWP's obligation for stream restoration in Mono Basin. We have new flow regimes for Rush, Lee Vining, Walker, and Parker Creeks, and they're intended to mimic the natural hydrographs. A big component of the project is the modification to the Grant Lake Reservoir spillway to allow for larger controlled releases at forecasted water year types. For the project, there is an additional 12,000 acre-feet of water after completion of certain project actions. We will have continued monitoring and reporting of stream fisheries, waterfowl, mineralogy, and hydrology. After completing the project, we will have continued export of water to the City of Los Angeles, and we will also have continued application of the Mono Lake elevation criteria for the public trust value of raising Mono Lake. So if we can go to the next slide. I just want to quickly go over the construction components that are associated with the project, and there are 2 of them. So the main one that we've been talking about is the modification to the spillway for Grant Lake, but there's also another component which is the rotovalve replacement. So first, for the spillway cost, we're looking at around $27 million to do that work, and the overall duration for that work in terms of construction is 4 years in length. And that basically comes down to having to work in certain seasons. Obviously, you have to work during the summer months because the winter months make it difficult to do construction. For the outlet valve, we're looking at $5 million currently, and that's the overall estimate at this time, with about 1 year in total for that construction. But just one thing I want to add for the outlet valve, that valve is roughly 80 years old. So it has already been planned for replacement. So, for this project, it is slated for the project, but it would have been done anyways. That said, that valve is essential for bringing the flows into Rush Creek for the restoration. The project components, we have the spillway approach and spillway channel, the concrete head wall, Langman gates, slide gates, a vehicle bridge. We have some road improvements, power poles, control buildings. So just everything I mentioned here. In the overall image to the right, you can see in the slide, everything is kind of not very clear. So the next slide, what I'd like to do is show a model of the Grant Lake spillway modification, and I'll talk through this to give you a better idea of what we are planning on doing. So Steve, you can start the video. Hope this works. Perfect. So we're coming into the approach channel. This is, again, the Grant Lake spillway modification. These are the 2 Langman gates. A Langman gate is a flow over gate proposed for the project. This channel will be realigned and deepened. Then you get to now some head walls along the side channels here, and some fencing for protection for for the public. Then we get into a skilling basin. This is all new
Adam,
work.
can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Are you putting any in conduit or thinking about any kind of, because these are not fish spillways, right? These are just water, right? Are you thinking about putting any in conduit hydro, or not in conduit because it's not a conduit, like just in canal hydro?
No, for the timing, the water over the spillway that does not flow, I guess on a yearly basis. So it happens only during certain year types. So if we have a good water year, then the water will go over the spillway and it'll add into it depending on the forecasted water year type. So if it's like a normal, wet, normal, or extreme wet, then we could see water going over the spillway. But under dry conditions, we wouldn't expect the water to be going over the spillway. So
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So thank you, Steve. Just real quick and get it going again. So we have a proposed bridge over the modified spillway approach into Rush Creek. This bridge is for operations for access as well as for the public to safely cross over the spillway channel. We're going to swing back and get another view of the proposed work there for the spillway modification. We're going to have a nifty, the vehicle's going to drive over the bridge and show how that goes. And then we're going to fly back up the spillway channel. Again, this is the filling basin, all new work, all new head walls. There is an access road on both sides of the spillway channel that is all have to be excavated out. Again, we're back to the Langman gates. Again, there's two of them. One is for redundancy. And then you can see the concrete pad, and also you can see the control house that will be used to raise and lower the Langman gates, the flow over gate. So we can pause it there, Steve. Thank you. And then we can move on to the next slide. And I just wanted to lastly talk about DWP's commitment to the environmental protection and enhancement in Mono Basin. The DWP has successfully provided oversight to state board scientists, as well as conducted monitoring with our own staff. The DWP will pass on these efforts to a new monitoring assessment team. The assessment team will be looking over the fisheries, pool and habitat type surveys, water temperature, geomorphology, waterfowl population, Mono Lake, the nology, and also vegetation. So those will be on to the new assessment team, moving away from our DWP staff. And with that, that is my portion of the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jane Hopman.
Wait, can I ask another question here? Sorry. So
sure.
It says LADWP will pass future monitoring efforts to a new monitoring assessment team administered by the settling party. So who makes up that team and who pays for that?
So the DWP has a contribution that we'll be paying for the assessment. I think we will also be part of the team, but the team will come in from consultants that will be, I think, overall brought to the team by and monitored by, I think, the settling parties. I don't know if
I was going to say, is there someone who has a more specific answer to that question?
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marty.
Go ahead. Is that someone? Go ahead. Or Dave, go ahead.
The monitoring assessment team is made up of all four settling parties: DWP, CDFW, Mono Lake Committee, and California Trout. We have an equal vote, but DWP funds the monitoring assessment team, and I believe, I don't have the settlement agreement in front of me, but I believe it was around $550,000 in the first year, and it's adjusted for inflation each year after that. And it will continue until such time as the Water Board determines that monitoring is no longer necessary. So there's a couple of reopeners within the settlement agreement that could trigger that type of action.
And the purpose is within the new flow regime is to make adjustments and verify that the plan is working as desired, and to make recommendations, and also look at the amount of water each year based on the year type, and to come up with an operations plan so that everybody has the same expectation going in, and we're looking at the same data and the same success rate for the stream health.
Okay, and then just to your what you were saying, Dave, about how long it goes and the reopeners, what is contemplated as the duration?
10 years, I believe, was the stated duration. But again, there are some conditions within the settlement agreement that if certain conditions exist, we can petition the water board to exit early.
And so this is incremental to all the funds that we're currently using to from a scientist and stream assessment perspective, and all the current work that we're doing, correct?
That's correct. So currently we're doing the monitoring with our staff and doing other restoration work. So this would be part of the settlement agreement that we expect that the state board would adopt with the license. And part of the settlement was to fund this new, regarded as independent group that would be equally performed by all the parties or overseen by all the parties in the settlement. And as Dave said, it might have missed, he said, 10-year plan unless things become stable and there's no more monitoring necessary, as as the state may decide.
Okay. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay.
Adam, sorry for the digression.
No problem. Thank you. I will pass it on to Chuck Holloway and Jane Hopman.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jane Hopman. I work in the Environmental Planning Assessment Group and Joint System. I'll be sharing with you today the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, compliance aspect for the Mono Basin Water Rights Licenses Project. This is also the environmental document being recommended for adoption as item 16 in the board agenda. Next slide, please. We determined an initial study mitigated negative declaration was the appropriate document for this project as lead agency. We circulated it from the end of October to early January, extended once to accommodate a request by the Big Pine Paiute Tribe. We made the MND available for review on our website. We posted in the Mammoth Times and the Annual Register. We mailed notices of intent to agencies, interested parties in California Native American tribes provided by the Native American Heritage Commission. And we also conducted AB 52 tribal consultation with the Bishop Paiute Tribe, the Big Pine Paiute Tribe of the Owens Valley, and the Mono Lake Cotzetica Tribe. Next slide, please. In our environmental document, the mitigated negative declaration, our CEQA analysis considered both short and long-term impacts for both operation and construction of the spillway. We identified potentially significant impacts to biological, cultural, and tribal cultural resources, as well as geology. However, we identified mitigation measures that were able to reduce the level of significant to less than significant for all three items, which is why we went forward with an MND. Next slide, please. The mitigation measures we incorporated into our document included worker awareness training for the sensitive resources out there, pre-construction surveys, a revegetation plan after construction's done, and prevention of invasive species during construction. We also incorporated cultural monitoring, both archaeological and Native American, avoidance of identified sites that are out there, and in the event that maybe we had to conduct a laydown in an area that wasn't previously identified for construction, we would make sure to survey that site prior to construction. We also incorporated a paleontological monitor and survey plan for protection of paleo resources. Next slide, please. We received 10 comment letters on the MND that was circulated, 2 from responsible agencies, so the State Water Board and California Department of Fish and Wildlife, also from the settling parties. We received a comment from Caltrans, from 2 tribes, and from these 3 nonprofit organizations. Next slide, please. This is a table summarizing the comments we received from the settling parties and responsible agency. There were various clarifications, edits, and suggested changes for the project background and license specifics, and they shared support for the project. In response to their comments, we incorporated those changes and thanked them for their support. The tribe submitted questions and clarifications on the project and agency involvement for this, and also expressed concerns about AB 52 compliance. And in response to that, DWP further provided a documented log of all of the correspondence, meetings, phone calls, emails, letters
Jane?
that have occurred up until this point. And
Jane?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with AB 52, and can you just enlighten me on what clarifications did they need on agency involvement?
So AB 52 is a process through which a lead agency under CEQA undergoes a tribal consultation, and it's supposed to be incorporated very early on into the project. It's supposed to be within 14 days of a lead agency determining to undergo a project. And since this project has quite a detailed history, you know, we started consultation back in 2015. Oftentimes there are changes in tribal representatives during that time, so maybe they didn't have the full history of the correspondence that's happened up until this point. So we made sure to provide those clarifications, and we also wanted to make sure that subsequent meetings and communications could be held, especially in light of their concerns. So we reached back out to them. We had subsequent meetings and correspondence to make sure that the tribe's concerns were understood and presented.
And just since you noted it on the one above and one below, that those entity groups shared support, is the suggestion that there is a lack of support, or just they did not comment one way or the other?
It wasn't, no, I wouldn't say that there was a lack of support. And I think Charlotte Lang, the commissioner or the tribal chairperson for the Kazetica tribe, she phoned in earlier today and expressed her support for this project.
Just add one comment about AB 52. It's a requirement on all our CEQA documents, so we do go through a process with each one to do the appropriate tribal outreach and consultation for every CEQA document.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And the final category are the nonprofit organizations. They provide recreational educational opportunities for youth out in the Mono Basin, and they all expressed support for the project as well. And that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'll pass it off to Dr. Mike Diaz.
Thanks, Jane. Good afternoon, President McCLAIN-HILL, Vice President Reyes, Commissioners. My name is Mike Diaz. I'm a principal at Watercourse Engineering, a consultant to the Department of Water and Power. I've been working in the Mono Basin since 1989. I started when I was 12 years old. I'll be talking to you this morning about computer modeling analysis and results pertaining to Mono Basin operations, Mono Lake elevation, how they support the renewal of the department's water rights license and settlement agreement. Next slide, please. So you heard about this. It's a terminal saline lake. It's a big lake. If you were to place it in the LA Basin, it would extend east-west from downtown to about Santa Monica and northwest from downtown to about Burbank. This year, on April 1st, it was around 6,381.28 feet. Puts it at about 155 feet deep. It's about 45,000 acres today and holds about 2.5 million acre feet of water. The key here is that Mono Lake's elevation is strongly related to its hydrology. Next slide, please. Very briefly here, I just want to talk about the hydrology, and I'm an engineer, I should have put a little not to scale item on the pie chart there, because that is just an estimate really to show you relative magnitudes. But what we really find is that runoff, precipitation, and evaporation are the largest players in the basin. There's other hydrologic elements, but they're typically small, and they play a minor role on an annual basis. I also added just an estimate kind of to illustrate about how much the maximum pre-transition export of 16,000 acre feet a year is in the pie chart by that little dashed line over there. Next slide, please. So you're all familiar with the facilities and the system, the Levining conduit, the diversion infrastructure at Levining Creek, Walker Creek, Parker Creek, Grand Lake Reservoir, in Pounds Rush Creek. There's the Mono Gate 1 return ditch, there's the West Portal conveyance, and there's the Mono Craters Tunnel, all part of the City of LA's facilities. Next, please. So I want to talk briefly about the role of modeling in D1631 and the model that was used, and this will tie into more current modeling. So the development and the application of the Los Angeles Aqueduct Monthly Planning Model, LAMP, by the State Board was used to evaluate these various relationships that are in these bullet points here. Relationships between flows and tributary streams and Mono Lake surface elevation, water deliveries to the city of LA. And that model was built using a period from 1940 to 1989. That is the data set source. They also used this tool to estimate the time to achieve transition from Mono Lake to attain 6391. And they also looked at long-term export of the city of LA's water right delivery post-transition. So pre-transition just simply means before the lake has attained 6391, there's a set of rules. One of those is the department maximum annual export is 16,000 acre feet a year. Post-transition means the lake has achieved 6391. And after that point, there's a new set of export rules. Some years the department could take more water, and some years probably less water, in certain cases no water. But there's pre-transition and post-transition conditions. Next slide, please. So that was a brief introduction of where the State Board LAMP model came from. And while that model has not been widely used, the department has continued to work on modeling and updating modeling and applying its own tools. The current version is called eStream, and it uses historical hydrology from 1980 to 2020. It represents all the facilities I just mentioned: Levining conduit, diverse infrastructure, Grant Lake operations. It represents the prescribed year type dependent stream flows that Mark Hanna spoke about, these stream ecosystem flows. It tracks Mono Lake elevation on a monthly basis using regression relationships. And these are statistical relationships similar to the approach used in the State Board LAMP model. And it calculates export based on hydrology, facilities capacities, export rules, and these are based on pre and post transition. So you could start a run and model years the lake would attain 6391, for example, and it would shift to a new set of export rules.
So is it fair to say that the, just based on what this model can do, or it's listed that the state one or the old one didn't do these things?
If you can bear with me for just a couple of slides, we'll talk about how that came to be. It's a great question, thank you. I would like to mention this model has been used and it was reviewed in the facilitative process that Mark Hanna also spoke about earlier. We've continued to update it as new data becomes available and new information, kind of just to keep it fresh. So next slide, please. Briefly, these statistical relationships that are used in this tool are available data from the basin: Cane Ranch precipitation, Mono Basin runoff, not including Mill Creek to the north of Levining, released to Mono Lake from the city's facilities, and surface area of Mono Lake. The period of record I mentioned was 1980 to 2020, and this avoids a falling lake elevation period, this pre-1982 actually, and that will get to the previous question in just a moment. And it also includes a period of increasing lake levels, decreasing lake elevations, wet periods, dry periods, and you can see in the figure right that this model tracks the historic elevations closely over that 40-year period. Next slide, please. So the application of eStream and review of the E1631 analyses through time have indicated a longer period of time for Mono Lake to transition to 6391 and smaller long-term average annual exports than the State Board model predicted. To assess these differences, comparisons were made with the Mono Lake elevations from eStream and the State Board LAMP model. And using this 1990 to 2020 period, the State Board LAMP model produced a water surface elevation 4.5 feet higher than historical elevations. That is the bottom right graphic there. That also suggested a systematic bias. The model began to drift away, while the east stream model of the same period finished a little bit higher, but generally tracked historic variability well. And why this difference? And I think this gets to the previous question. The State Board LAMP regressions were developed using the period 1940 to 89, a period when Mono Lake declined over 40 feet. And during this period of falling lake elevations, groundwater from the basin would drain into Mono Lake. This is implicitly included in the State Board LAMP regression equations. However, when we turn around and try to raise the lake, this additional groundwater will not only not be coming into the lake, but we'll have to repay, if you will, the deficit to the groundwater system. And so the result is that that model was overly optimistic on two important counts. It underestimated the time to transition, and it overestimated the post-transition long-term average export. Next slide, please. Using each stream and updated data, new set of relationships, we also run this through various hydrologies, and we can see that the transition, and for these runs we use 6382.6, they were done last year, was about 6 years if you had the wettest period on the record, and it was over 4 years if you had the drier periods of the record, with an average of about 22 years. So you're looking at a range, not a single number, but a range of possible conditions. And it's probably going to be a couple of decades, even from today's elevation. And also the Mono Lake elevation under post-transition conditions, one of the other elements we found is that it didn't stay at 6391 as frequently as with the State Board LAMP model. In fact, only about 1 in 4 years did it maintain that target elevation of 6391. And that was over a 4-year simulation. And finally, the long-term post-transition elevation export was quite a bit less than identified in D1631. 30,000, 800,000 acre feet was the 1994 number. We estimate that number is in the range of 16,000 acre feet at this point.
I just have a quick question. Is the lake elevation subject of the M&D that's before us today?
I'm sorry, could you restate that? I just misunderstood the question.
No, you're going through and presenting modeling results regarding the lake elevation, which is important and very interesting. I'm just trying to understand its connection or relationship to the stream alteration or stream restoration M&D that's currently before us.
I'm glad you brought that question up. I think the issue is this is a notable deviation from D1631, these results that we found with the lake level, and this new information is information associated with those stream flows that have been specified in the MND. So those stream flows, everything is tied together, I guess is how I would say it in the Mono Basin. You can't do one without the other, and there's been a bit of a perhaps expectation that the identified stream flows would arrive at a Mono Lake elevation in a relatively short amount of time versus a longer amount of time. This is just a clarification on that point.
I think Dave has something to offer on this. Dave?
Right. From a legal perspective, we have a petition, as Richard Bruce Collins pointed out at the beginning, to have a holistic living license with the State Water Board. And it includes not only the changes to the streams, but it includes a renewal of our current water rights criteria. So both the elevation criteria and the water exports are part of the application to the State Board. So when they receive our M&D, they will be using that to issue a new water rights license or renew our water rights license. That's why.
Do you have a sense of how the State Water Resources Board is have you been in communications with them on these adjustments, and do you have a sense of how they will, how they're taking these new numbers and these new results?
Yes, we have communicated this to them. We've worked with them pretty closely since the facilitated process and the settlement agreement in terms of time to transition. The modeling. The modeling is open and available. The parties have a copy of the model they can use. So it's a pretty, it's documented, tested, been peer reviewed. I think that the state has all that information in hand.
So it has everything it needs then to approve the license renewal?
From my perspective, but there's other people who have other elements that I'm not familiar with.
But yes, Commissioner, to respond, so when the state issues a license, they're responsible for ensuring that the public trust's values are balanced. And so that's what they did in D 1631. And so they would have to make that determination again. The state is not anticipating holding a hearing on this. So providing all this information in a public forum, and then this board, by its adoption of the M&D, certifying that in the board's opinion that the public trust values remain balanced is part and parcel with what we would send to the state to get our admitted license. So this is part of their legal responsibility in issuing a water rights license is that balancing of the public trust. All these things were critical elements of that balancing that took place in the 1990s.
And I'll be remiss to not add that we don't stand in the shoes of the water board. Obviously, they're going to do their own balancing. They're going to take our document, evaluate its viability and its content, and they will arrive at their own decisions. But we are not aware of any additional work that's been submitted with respect to our petition. There were no protests, I don't believe, that were submitted to the water board. And I'm not aware of any independent staff reports from the state water board relating to our petition.
Marty, you said that there's been no hearing set. So we expect what happens next? I mean, I know we're adopting this mitigated next deck, and with respect to our adoption, the work that we have authorized can then proceed, correct? Independent of any action by the state board, is that right?
I think our work could proceed independent of any action. The delivery of the flows that the facility was planned for would need to be approved by the state in a submitted license. And so so remember, all the agreements so far has been amongst the settling parties. The state is not part of that, so they're taking that settlement agreement as well as the M&D, and we have actually an application that's been submitted to them for an admitted license. So to deliver the flows, that's the point that we actually would have to have the amended license from the state. Just as a matter of their process, typically the responsibility for doing amended license has been delegated to the director who heads up that area of the state board. They won't typically have a hearing necessarily. There was a hearing anticipated on this when they issued the first license in 1994. That hearing has not happened and is still not scheduled, but the act of actually issuing a new license a lot of times would be more of an administrative action by the senior staff at the state board. I don't know if I said that very clear or not. I might not have been very clear about that. If I wasn't, I could try again. I apologize. Mike, you want to wrap? Mike, you want to wrap up there?
Sure. Last slide, please. Again, this modeling takes into account all of the variables. It's consistent with previous work done in the basin, and it's a sufficient tool to assess both the effects of the stream flows and the lake elevations and exports. Thank you. If you have any questions, I can take them now, or we can deal with those later. Thanks.
I am going to try to, this is Commissioner LEHRER. Is it okay to ask questions now, President McCLAIN-HILL?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I mean, we were shown some of the work that was done at Rush Creek a few months back, and I had been to Mono a few times, I was just so incredibly impressed and heart by the, you know, the restoration work and of course not, and just, you know, thought it was wonderful to see, and that over those decades, so much was done that some of us might not have been aware of. So it's a very, it's wonderful to know that that level of work has been, you know, going on within DWP and with all of the consultants that you work with. So, I mean, to me, it seems like approving moving forward is really important. That there will always, you know, there will always be new technologies, and I would imagine that we're building upon something we've already accomplished and not trying to reinvent the wheels. So I just would say that you know, the science seems to be there to sort of justify some of the accomplishments, and maybe the metrics will change, and maybe there will be new discoveries, and but I just I see us just sort of saying we're in a good place. We've done some great work, and we would integrate perhaps some valued sort of changes to the strategies, the physical construction of some of these projects, but with a sense that what's already been accomplished is a given. We're not reinventing or, you know, saying, okay, Rush Creek, sorry, there's, you know, we're going to give you we're going to destroy what you got and we're going to give you something else. I just, it just is a disconnect for me as, you know, sort of a landscape architect and a geology and ecology student over decades. You know, we're actually having, we should just build on what we have.
Mark, do you want to respond at all to the Commissioner's comment? About what kind of changes we expect to see?
Yeah, I had a slide there, and apologies, my video, I don't know if it's started or not, but if you can hear me, great. So, right, it has been a long process, and it's nice that you've been up there to see the successes and appreciate you know, the changes and the work that's gone on by the department and the settling parties. And you know, what we see up there is actually a result of you know a lot of sweat equity, but also the work of the hydrographs, the prescribed stream flow measures that have been released down the streams over the past multiple decades. And so, right, in implementing new technology to find a way to deliver even greater peak flows, as I mentioned, has the ability to you know, change and kind of knock the systems off of their current equilibrium and move them into whatever that next stage will be. It's a big undertaking by the department, and you know, we'll set the streams into a kind of a pre-development condition, you know, prior to when water development occurred in the late 1800s and beyond. So
Thank you. That's what I was afraid of. I would say that I would liken this to when many of our sort of environmental leaders and nonprofits in Los Angeles think they can bring the river, the LA River in the midsection back to the 1800s. But like it or not, we built the city, and here we are, and we have urban conditions. So we have to adapt, and and what I call it urban ecology. We can't go back 100 years. So I think we live with our best decisions, the best choices that we make based on the technology that we have at a certain time. And I think in the case of Rush Creek, call it Rush Creek, 30 years, and it just is amazing where it's at, and you just have to adjust as you go. Of course, if you're starting a new restoration project somewhere, what are the technologies that you use at that point, or the E-stream modeling, any number of models that might come to light. So tricky sort of decision making, tricky in the sense of complicated, but I think we should be very satisfied with where we are today on Rush Creek.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is the presentation done, or are we in the question? Is the presentation complete or not?
The presentation is complete.
Presentation is complete. Terrific. I know that the staff had a video that they wanted to show. Are we able to pull up the video?
We're checking, President.
For decades, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has been a forward-thinking leader in preserving our state's beautiful natural resources while providing safe, reliable water for the city of Los Angeles. Angelenos are fortunate to have water rights that provide them with clean, affordable drinking water. Those water rights also come with an important responsibility of protecting the natural habitats and waterways that surround. LADWP is proud to work hand in hand with regulators, environmental advocates, and local voices to care for California. LADWP's success in Mono Basin serves as a roadmap for what is possible when stakeholders work together. The Mono Basin is a unique region in the Eastern Sierra, which includes Mono Lake, Grand Lake Reservoir, and a system of streams that flow throughout the region, providing water supplies for the Eastern Sierra and the city of Los Angeles. Since the early 1980s, LADWP has been dedicated to the environmental restoration of Mono Basin. In addition to investing in dozens of restoration projects to protect and enhance natural ecosystems, exports have been reduced by 80%. The water is now used to support the environment and improve the ecological vibrancy of the region.
When you look at the creeks and you look at how environmental sensitivity and laws changed right when we were doing these projects early on, I think these are a model of success, to be honest. Anyone can see for themselves how beautiful the land is, how it's returned to its natural state. And you're talking mountain creeks and the Sierras in an otherwise kind of semi-arid, kind of high desert region.
Like the rest of California, Mono Basin has seen declining snowfall and rainfall in recent years. But because of LADWP's investments, lake levels are rising and stream systems are healthy and continuing to recover. Species populations have returned to creeks and streams as flows have been restored. In 2011, state officials confirmed that Mono Lake is a stable, self-sustaining habitat that will continue to thrive.
Reestablishing perennial flow in the creeks has helped to support the growth of wetland and riparian vegetation. And these, are not only good for lots of songbirds and other wildlife, deer, other mammals, things like that, but the wetland environment also supports waterfowl use.
And now, LADWP is advancing one of the largest environmental restoration projects in the Mono Basin by launching the environmental review process for a structure at Grant Lake Reservoir in the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains. Enhancing the Grant Lake Reservoir spillway will be the capstone to decades of restoration work and will fulfill LADWP's commitment to a landmark 2013 settlement agreement that brought diverse stakeholders together to chart a unified path forward for the final stages of stream restoration in Mono Basin. This structure will be used during specific wet year conditions to deliver higher flows through Rush Creek that runs from Grant Lake Reservoir to Mono Lake. By completing this project, the City of Los Angeles and LADWP are once again reaffirming their commitment to protecting California's natural resources and LADWP's sources of safe, reliable drinking water for ratepayers. Today, creeks and wildlife habitat in Mono Basin have largely been restored. The lake and its tributaries offer abundant resources for the unique waterbirds nesting on shore and a healthy environment for the plants and fish to thrive. At LADWP, we take seriously our responsibility and obligation to protect California's waterways. While California may never again look as it did 100 years ago, projects like the successful restoration of Mono Basin show that by working together, we can preserve a healthy, sustainable California for generations to come.
Thank you so much. That was well worth the wait. Appreciate that. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one more general question. And by the way, I don't know if the CalTrap team is still on, Reggie and Richard, but I am a avid fan of the work CalTrap does as a fishing family. So I just want to thank you for that. But my question really is around air pollution, and if anything comes into play there. I feel like I read something about Great Basin and the region with concerns around dusts or air quality or anything along those lines. And I'm just wondering if that factors in any way here.
The issue with the air pollution is an interesting one because I think what you read is about maybe 2 years ago or less, there was an article on the front page of the LA Times with the air pollution control officer for the Great Basin Air Pollution Control District talking about monitoring dust from Mono Lake and where the sources of that dust are from. When the state made its balance the public trust values in 1994, they included a little additional footage of elevation of the lake to accommodate air quality and to as a way to make sure that the dust from Mono Lake was controlled. And so incorporated in Decision 1631 was the balancing of air pollution from dust from emitting from the lake bed. And so that one question that remains, that if it's true from Mike Diaz's modeling, that'll take a little longer, we believe, with climate change for Mono Lake to reach the same elevation. Does anything else change? And Great Basin has not weighed in comments, I don't believe, from the MND. But we believe that given what the lake has done historically, and with what's now probably close to 1 million years of data that they used in some of their analysis, that the public trust values remain to be balanced. And that was what we would be recommending to the state of California, State Water Resources Control Board, with the submittal of the M&D is that the guidelines that they had put forward for lake elevation and the plans for stream restoration all continue to remain consistent with our license and the diversions that they had identified. Dave, did you want to add anything to the commissioner's question
No, but it really does go to the core of why we included this in the MND. We knew that there was a change in baseline from 1994 in terms of the projections as far as the lake recovery was going, and that would affect the state's ability to perform its public trust balancing and evaluate the beneficial uses of water. So we felt it was really important to do this modeling up front so that when the board visited our petition with all of its components, that it could make an informed decision with respect to allowing continued diversions, setting lake elevation criteria, et cetera.
So, but if,
would also note that right now, Great Basin doesn't have an operative SIP. They actually had to withdraw that from EPA for some reason last fall. So there's no planning document there. So obviously we're going to have to work with Great Basin in terms of next steps. But right now, we just wanted to provide as much transparency as to what we knew to be happening as possible.
Okay, and all that makes sense, but it sounds like Great Basin has a little bit of different jurisdiction. So why were they not included in the settlement?
We actually had suggested that they were a necessary party amongst the settlement parties. The other parties didn't feel the same, so they were not part of the settling group.
Okay, which seems like a little loose end, but okay. Thank you.
So that's the conclusion of our presentation. I appreciate the time. I apologize it took a long time, but it was very important for us to have the full breadth of information presented publicly for the board and for the public to see. The board's decision on item 16 will be your recommendation to the state that the work that we've done is complete and should be sufficient for them to continue to find that the public trust values are balanced as they have been in the past, and to continue our diversions, but under the new flow regimes that are identified by the state scientists. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty. I just want to say that appreciate not just the staff's presentation, but again, all of the time, energy, effort, and decades of work that's taken to get us to this place. So appreciate the engagement and participation in this hearing of two of our settling partners. And note that there is still a great deal of work, collaboration, a number of knotty issues to sort and suss out as we move forward, particularly around lake elevation. And I take Commissioner Lehrer's point with respect to the pressures that we all face, climate change, et cetera, as we seek to do the best possible job of environmental stewardship that we can do. And I know and appreciate the staff's commitment to that tenet, while at the same time, obviously protecting and preserving the city's water rights. So with that, we will move off this presentation and go to item number 11 on our agenda.
Excuse me, President McCLAIN-HILL.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Would you like
Monthly
to take
report.
a vote on item 16? Would you like to take a vote on item 16?
No, I'll take it. I will take it in order.
Okay.
So next on the agenda actually is item number 9, monthly reports. Are there any comments or questions regarding our monthly reports? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move to item 11, which was called by Commissioner Reyes. Is there a presentation or do you have questions, Commissioner?
I just have a question and a comment about a policy concern that I have. So I understand The proposed amendment has been reviewed as to legality and form. My concern is about the process and our policy. I will be remiss in my obligation as a commissioner if I don't call out the process issue and how this contract is being managed. So last year, if you recall, I also posed an objection to a contract of a similar situation, similar nature, where 3 amendments were made that increased the original GM approved contract amount by about 3 times the original contract. So my thinking is that if you know that the scope of the work is changing significantly, what have you done to prepare it to be, because I know that if there is a significant change in the modification of the work, that there are steps that are needed to be done. And one of them is to take a look at the competitive bidding. So I was informed by Erin Henning yesterday that a bench contract will be established via an RFP. So my question is, what is the status of that RFP? And will the bench contracts be ready by the time this amended contract ends at the end of this year?
Thank you for that question. And I will tell you that this contract and the need for the amendment is solely on me. When we undertook our racial equity plan and partners in response to the mayor's racial equity directive, and also looking at our own goals to find out where we stood as a department to the study, it was my idea to contract with Dakota Communications to assist us in that effort, and they've been instrumental in us being very successful in that. At the time, I, along with the team, really did not understand, the level of effort it would take to get to the point that we're at now, and we've done as you've seen in the presentations, a very deep dive and put together a very good work product. But you're correct. I mean, this is not the way we wanted to do contracting. And so what we have now is we have a new RFP is being worked on to come out ideally very shortly, so that we can have a bench contract with a number of contractors that we've planned on and also budgeted for the new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. And the reason I want to set a bench of contractors is I know that we're going to need skills beyond what we have here at the department and resources to help us with our efforts, both internally and externally, as we work on those issues. And so, and I also want to have a diverse group of contractors that represent all parts of the community as well. And so, what I needed now is I need to be able to continue the work that we're doing, so we do not have a gap in that work while the bench contract's going on. I can tell you that right now, our first interview panel team is interviewing DEIO candidates. I expect that in May we'll have a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer selected and job offer be made, and I would like that person to be able to be part of selecting the team of consultants that'll work to serve them. So we're laying out the RFP process so that when we do have this person on board that heads up that office in the near future, they will be obviously have a heavy hand in selecting the consulting firms that'll work to support them in their efforts. My goal is that we use as little of this contract extension as possible. I put it out there just knowing how timing goes, put it out far enough and with enough resources at the current rate that we do the work to make sure that we do not have to come back to the board. But my goal is that this contract would be replaced with a set of bench contracts prior to it expiring. And so, but we wanted to put it out there to make sure we didn't have to come back to the board for any kind of addition. But again, this is moving right now, and I want to make sure that we continue the work that we're doing without a gap while we get the person on board who will head up the new office and the new contracts in place. But I think that during the course of the summer, we'll have those new contractors selected, and hopefully by the end of summer on board already. We won't need this till the end of the year.
So two things. What assurance can you give the board that that bench contract is going to be executed, in place, right, by the end of the year? Because I know that RFPs take a long time.
Yes, you do.
Process-wise. Secondly, on your justification, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth if there's the justification that, oh, we need to do this because the mayor's office tells us that we need to do this, that we are going to be looking at, continuity and all that. But really, the point that I'm trying to make is that the contracts have to be managed more effectively. You have in the original contract a stipulation that the monthly reports or weekly reports are supposed to be given to the EAGM, who's managing that contract on the original one. So then you know for a fact that there's already something more or in scope that's brewing, that you're going to be flagging, so that in order to avoid all these amendments and in an issue of transparency, right, and public trust, that you could have found a way to do another GM authority contract, or just really just take a look at what steps need to be needed earlier, and not come to the board where you have this urgent thing that needs to be done, because I would oppose it. For me, I think we're not following the rules that we're setting, that we ourselves should really be walking the talk. And more importantly, I would like to see the GM's office work on a guidance, right, for the GM approved contracts, that really centers on how contracts need to be managed, how to become more transparent, because both from an oversight and a business development perspective, more transparency is needed. I just need assurance, and I hope the board does too, that your office will develop those guidelines and compliance to the policy regarding the GM contract, so that we don't come to this situation over and over again. And every time that happens, I will post it, and I will post my objection to that type of a scope creep, especially because it's coming from a GM approved contract.
I appreciate that, and I can tell you that I will absolutely not be bringing back another amendment to this contract. The chance of doing another GM contract would have to be with another vendor, which would be essentially like restarting. And so the folks that are managing this contract, did see how we've been talking about this for a couple of months and how what we would need to do. And so it didn't just occur to us that all of a sudden we need to extend it. We've been looking at what we need to do to get it to go forward. Also looking, as you mentioned, the timing of an RFP and how long that process usually takes. So this has been a work in progress to get the RFP out and to get a formal contract put in place. And so that's why I have confidence that we'll be able to get it out fairly shortly.
Marty, I think that what Susana, just so you hear her, what she is telling you is that her comments are not specific to this contract. They're specific to all GM contracts, and how you manage the need for ongoing services related to those contracts. So I think it's something around, you may choose to enter into a contract for a limited period of time for a specified amount of money. But I think what she's suggesting is, at that moment, there should be some assessments being made as to whether or not those services will need to continue and expand beyond that initial limited scope contract and some strategy put in place that meets the needs of the organization. If the strategy is to do an RFP, then to put that in place early, to begin that process early enough so that it can be there before you're in the situation. If it's another, executive contract, to do that, but it's really the overall way in which that authority is managed so that it doesn't appear that the GM contracting is used as a kind of nose under the tent that then grows in scope and scale via amendment. I think that's what she's saying. Is that correct, Susana?
You're on point. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you. Yes.
Marty, so she's asking if your office has some mechanism in place to do that, not does your office have a mechanism in place to make sure we don't see this one?
We'll have to track it a little differently than we're doing now. When we've done a GM contract so far, when I've done a GM contract, I've not had the belief that it was going to need to parlay into something else generally. In this case, we were in a whole new area that we'd never gotten involved in before. And so we didn't envision or understand the scope, not the scope, but just the breadth of what the work, we knew what the scope was, but how deep we need to dive and the amount of effort it would take. In some places we have focus contracts and know exactly what it's for, but I hear you loud and clear. We need to develop mechanisms to know that we're not leveraging GM contracts inappropriately and then creating longer contracts out of that. I understand that loud and clear, and I'll make sure we have a way to report on that better. And GM contract should not be a shortcut to a permanent contract that the board should be approving.
And if we're talking about equity, that's one place where a change in policy or some guidelines will help.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I will certainly.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Berard.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marty. If we're saying that Dakota Communications can add key personnel and rate increases, then doesn't that mean then that the total amount of the contract with them will be higher?
Actually, the total amount will be within what we have. They actually did us a favor by starting at below their normal rate, and their normal rate is comparable to market rate for everybody else because we've checked that out. So all we're doing is just adjusting so we can pay them what they would normally get paid by anybody else. They've been basically working at a discount for the purpose of trying to help us get this work done. And as the work has gone on, it's been more involved. I think we've learned a lot through this process, and so we're just trying to keep that work moving forward, so we don't slow down, so we don't go backwards, and keep that moving forward. But at the same time, being fair to the contractor, the vendor, because they have been working at a discounted rate. Their rates are comparable with everybody else in the industry, so we're not asking for anything over and above. We're just looking to treat them fairly while we get more contracts in place for the future.
Okay. Have you had any experience with Dakota Communications?
Not me personally before this. I know they've worked for Joe Romalo in public affairs before, and they're a local firm, well known, and they seemed, when I thought that they'd be the ones to reach out to, it seemed to be a good decision, but they have a good reputation. I personally have not worked with them before this, though.
Okay, because I've known Kerman Maddox for many years, and his wife Capri, who works for Mike Fuhrer, and she's terrific. And I know some of the other people on staff there. They basically do political campaigns and water board campaigns. And what I'm wondering about is whether there's maybe some conflict of interest somewhere down the line with their clients and what we're doing.
I have not seeming that would give me that indication. They've done a fantastic job for us, been a very constructive part of the team. I mean, they do specialize in communications, and like I say, they've done good communication work, I understand, for public affairs before, not, you know, some years ago. They have a strong reputation, and honestly, I mean, this is they're a firm that I looked at. I talked to a few folks internally, and we looked at what we thought we might need in terms of developing a team, and I thought that they'd be someone that I should reach out to. And so, you know, they're certainly able to bid on, you know, more work in the future. There's no guarantee, but they've done a fantastic job for us, and I would like to keep them engaged while we're building the DEIO office and getting the set of contractors on board, which would give us a breadth of resources to use in the future.
Are we paying them a fee on a fee basis or an hourly?
It's an hourly basis. We're paying them for work as they do it, and so and it is a team approach. We have people who are here at the department, and then we have consultants as well that are working together on the team that have put together the racial equity plan, that have worked on the surveys, that have worked on the discussion with employee groups. And that are helping us continue to develop that. So this has all been a team effort, and it's all being paid by the hour as work as it goes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Yvette, would you please take the roll?
Is there a motion?
Oh, yes. Is there a motion to on item number 11
and 16?
We have to do them one at a time.
Okay.
So can I have a motion for item number 11?
Yes.
So second.
Second.
Yvette, please take the roll.
President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Vice President Reyes?
Aye.
Commissioner BARAD?
Aye.
Commissioner LEHRER?
Aye.
Commissioner NEEMAN Brady?
Aye.
5 ayes.
Thank you. And I called item 16 special so that we would have an opportunity to hear the significant presentation in advance of voting on this item. I don't have any additional questions. They were all answered in the context of the presentation. Is there any board member that has any additional questions before moving forward with item 16? May I have a motion to approve item 16?
I move that we approve item 16.
I second.
Terrific. We have a motion and a second. Would you take the roll, please?
President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Vice President Reyes?
Aye.
Commissioner BARAD?
Aye.
Commissioner LEHRER?
Aye.
Commissioner NEEMAN Brady?
Aye.
5 ayes.
Terrific. The item has passed. We'll now move into closed session. It is 1:49. Is it okay if we start closed session at 2?
Yes.
And is Mr. Tom there?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, that's terrific. Richard, if you would take us into closed session, which will begin at 2 o'clock. And for our closed session, it will be board members, our general manager, and Joe Brayovich only.
Right. The board shall recess into closed session for a conference with legal counsel regarding the item identified on the closed session agenda. The board shall publicly report any action taken in closed session and the vote or abstention of every member present thereon in accordance with section 54957.1 of the California Government Code. We adjourn to 2 o'clock as the Commission President indicated.
Thank you.
Thank you. We all have a separate link to come in on at 2 o'clock. So thank you.
Please remain silent until all mics are off. Thank you.